Melissa Kalyasinski was the youngest of 5 siblings in the Kalyasinski family. They were always friendly and were considered an exemplary family living near Chicago, Illinois, USA. Melissa was very friendly and compassionate. However, according to her sister Crystal, Melissa faced social difficulties during her childhood. She had trouble making friends at school and was often teased. Melissa suffered from this, but she remained friendly throughout her life. When Melissa grew up and graduated from school, she decided to dedicate her life to working with children. At 22 years old, immediately after receiving her certificate, she began looking for a job in her favorite field. She was interested in kindergartens, working as a nanny, and caring for the younger generation. Naturally, she always wanted to have children, so she waited for the right partner with whom she could start a family. Finally, luck smiled upon her professionally. Melissa became an assistant teacher at Manise Sobe Kindergarten located in Lincolnshire, a small, cozy suburb of Chicago. Melissa's eldest sister, Crystal, worked there and helped arrange for her position. Under Melissa's supervision were several small children, particularly Benjamin Kingen. It seemed everything was going well. She was happy to find fulfillment in her work with children, at least until January 14, 2009. That day, Melissa worked her usual shift as an assistant teacher. Benjamin appeared calm and played with the other children. At around 3:15 p.m., after the children were fed and the table cleared, Melissa placed Benjamin on the children's rug. He climbed into the rocking chair, played with a blanket, and began to fall asleep, just as he did after lunch. The teacher briefly stepped out, leaving Melissa alone with the children. Melissa became distracted by the other kids and later noticed something was wrong with Benjamin. The 16-month-old boy had orange foam coming out of nose. Crystal, who was with another group, quickly rushed to Melissa's screams and attempted to resuscitate the boy while calling 911. While they waited for help, Crystal made several attempts to revive the child. It was strange that Benjamin had no visible injuries, no open wounds, and no blood that could have caused his loss of consciousness. Melissa did not understand what could have happened. Benjamin was still alive when the ambulance arrived, and he was taken to the hospital as an emergency. Doctors fought for an hour to save his life, but at 4:50 p.m., Benjamin Kingen was declared dead. Initially, it was completely unclear what had happened to Benjamin. After the autopsy, the medical examiner concluded that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head inflicted several hours before the 911 call. Despite this, there were no external signs of injury, which seemed strange. Moreover, a skull fracture was found, causing extensive bleeding in the brain. The only way to help Benjamin was to act quickly, but according to the medical examiner, too much time had passed. Naturally, Melissa immediately came under suspicion since she was the last adult with whom Benjamin had interacted and was responsible for caring for the child in the teacher's absence. A few days into the investigation, Melissa was called in for questioning at the police station and quickly became the main suspect in the case. From the very beginning, she denied any involvement and claimed that she had no idea what had happened. However, the detectives were serious and considered her guilty of murder. The interrogations lasted 9 hours. Exhausted, Melissa eventually admitted that she had thrown Benjamin on the floor, claiming he probably died from a blow to the head. She was asked to demonstrate how it happened and threw a toy doll on the floor in front of them. According to the investigators, this reconstruction of events was convincing enough to justify her arrest and the charge of first-degree murder. However, on the same day, Melissa retracted her confession, asserting that she was innocent and had been a victim of police coercion. She insisted that her confession was made under pressure, and she denied, dozens of times, that she had harmed the child. According to her, she was held for long hours and constantly pressured. She believed that the only way to get out of the interrogation room was to confess to the murder. In total, Melissa spent about 14 hours in police custody, and her confession came after 9 hours of continuous pressure. She was even transferred to another department to reaffirm her statement and repeated her confession to another investigator on videotape. When the parents found out that Melissa was considered a murderer, they exclaimed that this must be some kind of mistake. The girl was always kind and very sweet, especially when it came to treating children. The family was sure that she was not guilty, but it became obvious that Melissa was in a very difficult situation. To defend Melissa's interests at the trial, the family even sold most of their property to hire the best lawyer. In November 2011, Melissa appeared in court. The prosecutor's case relied heavily on a video recording in which Melissa confessed to the crime. In her confession, she claimed that the children in the kindergarten were very restless that day, and that she had forcibly thrown Benjamin to the floor, which is probably how he hit his head. Melissa's defender, Paul DeLuca, insisted that the confession was coerced during interrogation and made under pressure from detectives who simply wanted to close the case as quickly as possible. The medical examiner had assessed the situation incorrectly from the start, deciding it was murder. Paul insisted that Benjamin had a recent head injury elsewhere. X-rays of Benjamin were used as evidence to support this theory, but the images provided by the prosecutor were too blurry to be relied upon. In the opinion of the forensic expert who performed the autopsy on Benjamin, they found a fracture in Benjamin that caused extensive internal bleeding. The specialist was certain that the injury was inflicted on the boy by a stranger using great force. The investigators had no doubt that a few hours before his death, Melissa had a fit of anger and used physical force against him. However, the autopsy report stated that there were absolutely no external injuries. There were no cuts, abrasions, or bruises on Benjamin's head or other parts of his body. Was it possible to break his skull in such a way that it would not be visible? The lawyer doubted it. When Melissa was brought in for questioning, she denied the police's suspicions more than 60 times. The conversation with her lasted for 9 long hours, during which she was never provided with a lawyer. According to her defense attorney, detectives put pressure on her during this time, forcing her to make a false confession, as they were mentally and physically exhausting her during the hearings in Lake County, Illinois. Prosecutors claimed that Benjamin was perfectly healthy. According to the expert, he personally examined the boy's body and felt the site of Benjamin's skull fracture with his own hands. Melissa's defense attorney assessed the chances of winning the case as very small from the very beginning. He believed that it would be easiest to try to get a mitigated sentence. It was difficult to refute the argument regarding the child's skull fracture, especially since the court referred to the medical experts whose opinions were considered authoritative. The lawyer found a single point that he managed to cling to. Shortly before the start of the hearing, the prosecutor handed him a disc with X-rays that were too dark and practically illegible. For this reason, the jury considered these arguments insignificant. They all stated that they could not see anything and did not take the pictures into account. Based on the experts' opinions and the recordings of Melissa's confession, on November 30, 2011, the jury retired to deliberate. They spent a little less than 7 hours, after which Melissa Kalyasinski was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 31 years in prison. As she left the courtroom, she continued to insist on her innocence. She had a vast number of supporters who considered her a victim of tyranny. Unfortunately, the evidence presented seemed unconvincing to the jury. The more the defense tried to find a way to save the client from prison, the more the prosecution's behavior resembled a conspiracy. 2 old teachers, including Nancy Collinger, made significant statements. She later spoke with the defendant's lawyer and also told investigators that during this period, Benjamin had hit his head. This occurred because of Benjamin's habit of leaning back. The boy fell and hit himself hard. The kindergarten called his mother and reported the incident, prompting her to take Benjamin to the doctor. However, after the examination, the expert stated that he did not see any problems or serious injuries. The pediatrician recommended that the relatives take better care of the child and simply send him home, insisting that there were no consequences. Why the doctor did not notice anything became unclear. It is curious that the police did not refer to Nancy at all during the trial or may have deliberately concealed these facts. Several kindergarten employees stated that for several days after this injury, Benjamin had been behaving sluggishly. He often displayed symptoms of a traumatic brain injury just 2 days before his death. He also exhibited alarming symptoms. The second teacher who worked with Melissa noticed that something was wrong with Benjamin. He vomited for no apparent reason, and a similar situation occurred again the next day. On the 3rd day, Benjamin died. When comparing the witness accounts, there is a convincing explanation for what happened to him. He had already sustained an injury that other kindergarten workers noticed 3 months before his death. However, Melissa had only worked there for a short time and did not have the opportunity to learn about this incident. She simply did not have time to learn his habits. According to the lawyer, Benjamin's condition gradually worsened because of an old craniocerebral injury. On the day he died, he likely leaned back again, resulting in a fatal blow that caused a hemorrhage. Unfortunately, none of these arguments had any effect. Melissa was determined to prove her innocence. The first progress in this case was made just a year after the prison sentence began in 2012. During this period, Lake County had a new chief medical examiner, Thomas Rudd. The lawyer met with him repeatedly, insisting that the case should be examined more closely. The expert became interested, took up the case, and carefully reviewed the images of Benjamin's brain. He found an image that was evidence of an old injury that the previous autopsy had missed. Thomas, along with another forensic expert who was also interested in the case, agreed. The experts had no doubt that the old injury could have been aggravated. Benjamin had likely caused this himself several days before his death. On that fateful day, several teachers still stated that Benjamin often leaned back and hit his head. Daycare worker Nancy was again interviewed. She was in the kindergarten on the day Benjamin died. According to her, she personally saw he fall backwards twice that day. The first backward was not very strong, it was softened by the furniture. However, the second time he fell, he hit his head quite hard. The doctor openly stated that the boy's old injury was indeed extensive and very dangerous due to its severity. Benjamin should have been under constant careful supervision, and no injuries to the head should have been allowed. Continuous supervision should have been ensured. The parents should have understood this. It would have been logical to take him out of kindergarten for a while and care for him more closely due to several strong blows to the head, which the child could not control. Fluid formed that pressed on the brain, which caused the respiratory system to fail. This was what ultimately led to his death. According to the doctor, it is worth noting that this convinced even Dr. Yupil Choi, who performed the initial autopsy. He reviewed the images of Benjamin's brain and agreed that he had missed evidence of trauma during the autopsy. However, he refused to change his initial report. At the trial, Choi signed a new report but deleted certain words, significantly downplaying the severity of the blow he initially reported. In 2015, another breakthrough occurred in this case, which seemed very promising. The doctor's staff found post-mortem images of Benjamin's brain and skull in the old medical examiner's office, which were much clearer than those shown to the defense attorney in 2011. It is now clear that Benjamin did not have a skull fracture at the time of his death. It is obvious that the boy was not beaten, he only had an old injury. This allowed the new medical examiner to change the cause of death on Benjamin's certificate from murder to undetermined. In addition, Kathleen Zellner, a lawyer who became interested in the case of Melissa Kalyasinski, took it up. She had built a career freeing wrongfully convicted people from prison and was always in search of justice. However, it was not easy. First, she needed to achieve a retrial of the case. At the end of 2016, her persistence paid off. The new defense attorney was given the opportunity to present evidence. Great hopes were placed on the X-rays, which showed no traces of a skull fracture. This radically changed the situation and became the irrefutable medical evidence refuting the claim of harm inflicted on Benjamin by Melissa. Kathleen insisted that, had the obscure darkened images revealing the true picture of what happened been shown at the first trial, the jury's decision would likely have been different. The doctor agreed that the argument regarding the supposed skull fracture was indeed very weighty at the initial hearing. Although this assertion was not true, the prosecution had referred to it at least 32 times, making it appear decisive. The prosecution tried to counter these assertions by claiming that the previous lawyer had the necessary software to lighten and enhance the images, but he simply did not do so. The defense denied that he actually had such programs, and furthermore, lightening the images could be regarded as falsifying evidence. During this stage of the hearing, another specialist, Manny Montez, spoke. In light of the reliable pictures discovered, questions arose. How could he have felt a non-existent fracture during the examination if it was not there? This seemed absurd, as his words were contradicted by another expert who stated that the assistant had never physically touched Benjamin or visually examined him. Nevertheless, both experts for the prosecution continued to insist on their conclusions. After the hearing, both doctors refused any comments on the case requested by journalists. After discussing all these inconsistencies, the judge made a decision and denied Melissa a retrial. He sided with the prosecution, arguing that Melissa's lawyer could have made the pictures clearer at the first trial, which was solely his responsibility. Melissa left the courtroom in tears, telling her lawyer that she simply did not understand why she should spend a decade in prison for something she did not do. For almost 10 years, her defense team filed appeal after appeal, all of which were finally rejected. In April 2018, their voice was heard. In the lawyer's opinion, the client was convicted based on false evidence. However, this again did not help, as the lack of credible medical evidence was evident. In 2022, a significant new event occurred in Lake County. A new prosecutor emerged who was interested in the case of Melissa Kalyasinski. However, to confirm or refute her guilt, something substantial was needed. The prosecutor recommended contacting a digital forensics company called Garrett Discovery. Two specialists immediately examined the X-rays of Benjamin and concluded that all the images had been altered by someone with malicious intent. Special software was employed to examine the X-ray images, allowing the brightness of the photographs to be reduced and darkened intentionally. At the same time, the images were blurred, making it nearly impossible to discern any details. The organization's experts informed the new prosecutor that they could not even imagine an innocent explanation for what had occurred. He was extremely indignant, insisting that this was essentially a crime of forgery of evidence, and that the perpetrator should be held accountable. The lawyer had high hopes for this meeting, convinced that something could truly be accomplished. To the surprise of the defense team and the Kalyasinski family, nothing happened. By April 2024, the lawyer decided to appeal to the governor for a pardon, requesting Melissa's release due to the lack of new evidence. Given the resistance from the law enforcement system to review the decision, it seemed that this was their only chance for freedom. A new appeal for retrial was filed on May 1, 2024, consisting of 337 pages. Several months passed before the argument was finally heard on July 9. The defense requested Melissa's release through an appeal to the governor of Illinois, citing new evidence from her term. She had served 16 years, and her expected release date was set for December 2042, with the possibility of parole appearing on July 9, 2024. A hearing was scheduled before the governor's board of prisoners. Then an unexpected event occurred. The new prosecutor met with the family of Benjamin and spoke with the parents and their lawyer. It's hard to say what was discussed, but afterward, the prosecutor addressed the governor's board, stating that he strongly opposed Melissa's appeal and had become convinced of her guilt. He argued that there was no new evidence that could convincingly prove her innocence, and he refused to meet with journalists or make any public statements regarding the matter. On July 9 of the same year, the lawyer took a counter-move by appealing to the Prison Supervision Board. Melissa still did not understand why the authorities were resisting so strongly. Several experts in computer forensics joined her cause, and a psychologist examined Melissa. The analysis indicated that she was easily susceptible to pressure, making her prone to giving false testimony. Furthermore, she had resisted the influence of detectives at the station for about 9 hours before breaking down. Various psychiatrists evaluated Melissa, diagnosing her with borderline intellectual functioning. Her comprehension score was only 4.8 points, which is quite low. It was noted that Melissa had a slight mental impairment, which made her an easy target for police pressure. Individuals with borderline intellectual functioning typically have an intelligence level of around 70-80, with retardation beginning below 70. It was also discovered that 2.5 years before Benjamin's death, Melissa had reported an incident of abuse, leading to her diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, from which she suffered when confronted by 2 detectives biased against her case. Under duress, she eventually confessed to a crime she did not commit. It was believed that Melissa's psychological condition warranted a review of the court's decision. However, 2 assistant prosecutors spoke out against it, including one who had participated in the hearing of Melissa case in 2011. Benjamin's parents also expressed their view, categorically opposing any reconsideration of Melissa's case, particularly Benjamin's mother, who insisted that Melissa had struck and killed their son. In their opinion, she deserved to remain in prison for the rest of her life. The medical experts brought in by the defense modified their stance, now arguing that the skull fracture that had been previously misidentified was, in fact, a normal bone suture in the cranial vault, and the expert had simply made a mistake. At 16 months, it was anticipated that after further hearings, the Prison Supervision Commission would provide the governor with a confidential recommendation, which could be decisive in determining whether to release Melissa. During a meeting, the assembled commission asked Melissa what she would say to the governor if given the opportunity. She said she would merely ask him to consider her case, believing that he would quickly see she had done nothing wrong regarding Benjamin Kingan if he reviewed the case materials. The prosecutor maintained that the lawyer should have been the one to edit the photographs. However, experts from the digital forensic lab asserted that he couldn't have altered the images while maintaining their resolution and quality without it being evident as a forgery. Melissa had spent nearly a decade and a half behind bars due to false statements and discredited evidence that could have jeopardized the careers of the individuals responsible. In the lawyer's report, despite the prosecutor's assertions, there was valuable information. Additionally, a specialist in complex confessions who took on Melissa's case spoke with the lawyers, the family, and Melissa herself. They also communicated with 2 employees from the daycare who worked there prior to the hiring of Melissa. This information revealed that Benjamin had a tendency to lean backward and had hit his head quite hard, which was previously unknown, possibly hidden by law enforcement. As of now, the case is under review by the governor, with no set timeframe for a decision. Melissa continues to serve her sentence. Her parents await her return, not believing in her guilt. Her room is still furnished as if she will return home from work at any moment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christa Waninger. On May 2, 1963, a tragic event occurred on Via Emilia in Rome when police were called to an apartment building after witnesses reported finding an injured girl. 2 police officers arrived at the apartment building and went up to the 4th floor. In the hallway between apartments 14 and 15, they discovered a blonde woman in a blue coat lying unconscious in a large pool of blood, her eyes wide with horror. Several people had gathered around her, including a shocked janitor and a young neighbor who worked at a medical center. The neighbor checked the victim's pulse, performed CPR, and did everything she could to keep the girl alive until an ambulance arrived. One of the neighbors called an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, it was too late. The girl was dead. The victim was identified as Christa Waninger, 23. She had come to Rome in search of success and fame, but tragically, she had been fatally stabbed 7 times. The police immediately began questioning neighbors and witnesses to piece together what had happened. However, no one had witnessed the attack, not even the residents of apartments 14 and 15. The police knocked on the doors of both apartments, and Gerda Hodap came out. When asked by the police about Christa, she stated that they were friends. They had planned to meet, but Christa was attacked and stabbed just steps away from Gerda's apartment. The attack occurred at 2:50 p.m., and Gerda claimed that she had been taking a nap and had not heard anything unusual. While Christa was brutally murdered behind closed doors, it caused quite a commotion on their floor. Her explanation seemed implausible. The doorman informed the police that Christa did not live in the building. They knew each other because the victim frequently visited Gerda's apartment. The murder had occurred nearby. After investigating a few blocks away, the police went to Christa's house, which appeared to be quite empty. Meanwhile, Gerda was taken to the police station for questioning while the authorities carefully examined the crime scene. Under the doorknob of Gerda's apartment, the police discovered a bloody handprint, indicating that Christa had tried to call for help. The building's doorman recalled that when he heard a woman scream, he quickly ran up the stairs. On his way, he encountered a strange man coming down who seemed startled to see him. At first, the doorman did not pay much attention to the strange man. However, he later suspected that there was a connection between this man and the case. When the doorman arrived at the scene, several residents from nearby apartments had gathered. They found Krista lying in a large pool of blood, her breathing irregular and her condition deteriorating. The witnesses were all in a state of panic and did not know how to help. Gerda, who was present at the police station, was willing to share any information she had about her friend Krista. She seemed genuinely concerned about the attack and did not understand why anyone would want to harm Krista. They had been friends for a long time, supporting each other in their modeling and acting careers. Gerda said that Krista was supposed to arrive at around 3 p.m., but she had been feeling unwell that day and had taken sleeping pills, which caused her to miss the attack. Although Gerda spoke about her sleep problems, she could not remember the name of the pills she had taken or explain why she had not canceled her meeting with Krista despite having gone to bed. The police found Gerda's story suspicious. Krista had suffered serious injuries, including 7 stab wounds, 3 of which were in the chest. The attacker had used a large knife to assault Krista, leaving her unable to be saved. In addition, Krista had several defensive wounds on her arms. The forensic expert observed that all of the wounds appeared to have been inflicted from above, indicating that the attacker was tall. In interviews with witnesses, it was confirmed that a man, described as unknown, had fled the scene shortly before the police arrived. Several people, including the concierge, reported seeing a tall man in a blue jacket leaving the building shortly after the attack. Using the descriptions of the witnesses, a composite sketch was created and subsequently published in newspapers and broadcast on television. The police reconstructed the timeline of events, determining that Krista left her apartment at approximately 2 p.m. and planned to return at 5 p.m. Before the appointment, she had visited a friend. About 30 minutes later, she arrived at Gerda's house, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and was attacked on the stairs. It is believed that the attacker knew Krista and was waiting for her. Police initially suspected her friend Gerda because of her strange behavior during the attack. A neighbor reported that she had called Gerda's apartment and heard someone moving around behind the door, but no one answered, perhaps out of fear. The police suspected that Gerda was withholding information. Gerda insisted that no one rang the doorbell until the police arrived and claimed that she had heard nothing until the police knocked. Krista's murder in broad daylight in central Rome caused a media frenzy. The police hoped to gather useful information from the public, but the widespread attention also led to rumors spreading rapidly. The police received dozens of statements, most of which were complex, while others simply restated what was already known. They investigated all known criminals with a history of knife attacks, focusing not only on those who might be hiding in Rome, but also checking neighboring cities, although this effort was fruitless. In the midst of these events, a wave of panic spread throughout the community. People became increasingly afraid to go out, and the police station was flooded with angry calls from locals urging them to arrest the person responsible for Krista's attack. Some callers even made threats to the police, demanding action to ensure the safety of the streets. Meanwhile, Gerda maintained her innocence, calling the police's suspicion of her an insult. The police began to explore other leads, focusing especially on those close to Krista. There were many indications that the perpetrator was connected to Krista, leading the police to believe that the attack may have been motivated by jealousy or personal animosity. Therefore, they looked into the relationships Krista had formed since moving to another country. One notable individual was Krista's boyfriend. He was very jealous and possessive, with evidence suggesting that he had abused Krista on several occasions. Their relationship was tumultuous, often triggered by his unfounded suspicions that Krista was cheating on him with other men. This jealousy may have stemmed from several factors, including Krista's notebook filled with the phone numbers of men in the modeling and acting industries. Her profession required her to socialize and network with many people, and Krista frequently attended social events to promote herself and build valuable relationships, which made her boyfriend feel uncomfortable. He became jealous of every random person she interacted with, and his insecurities led him to become increasingly controlling. Every phone call from a man was viewed as a betrayal, which angered her boyfriend. This pressure caused Krista to decline movie offers and made her financially dependent on him. The police identified two suspects: Krista's boyfriend, who had both a motive and a violent streak, and her friend Gerda Hodap, who was near the scene of the murder but claimed not to have seen or heard anything. It is possible that Gerda had a motive for the murder, perhaps wanting to eliminate an attractive rival. However, there is no evidence to support this theory. Journalists constantly intervened, probing for information and asking difficult questions. The police were puzzled by the presence of a strange man in a blue jacket. Although this man appeared at the crime scene and quickly left, he coldly mentioned that there was a woman screaming on the 4th floor, without offering any help. Other witnesses grew suspicious and tried to explain the presence of this stranger. The police concluded that the case might have been carefully planned, with the man in the blue jacket acting as a distraction. However, if that were the case, the criminal would have likely stayed at the crime scene, which raised suspicions about Gerda. Meanwhile, Gerda faced constant interrogations and became a media phenomenon. Journalists pursued her, spreading rumors and portraying her as a monster. The police believed that if Gerda was not involved in the murder, she may have acted as an informant or concealed information. However, to date, there has been no concrete evidence linking her to the case. The police continue to investigate the possibility of a random attack. However, they face a shortage of resources. A search of Krista's inner circle yielded no leads. Her address book contained many phone numbers related to men and various clubs in Rome, as well as organizations connected to modeling and acting. Hundreds of contacts had accumulated over the years. Despite a thorough police investigation, each contact led to a dead end. Gerda remained under close police surveillance. They even took her to the morgue to view Krista's body and observe her reaction. The police noted her emotionless response to their questions. The interrogations were repeated several times. Gerda changed her story, claiming that the doorbell rang when Krista visited. However, the screams that followed frightened her, so she did not open the door. Gerda explained her dishonesty by saying that she felt ashamed for not helping her friend. The police believed that she was a potential accomplice to the crime, suggesting that Krista had been lured there so that her attacker could kill her. Ultimately, the police were unable to obtain a confession that would identify Gerda as the killer, and at most, she could be considered an accomplice. By reconstructing the timeline of events, the police discovered why the janitor had not noticed a strange man entering the building. He had visited the utility room several times during the day. It was a complete coincidence that he had entered just before Krista arrived at the apartment complex. This raised suspicions that the attacker knew exactly when and where Krista would arrive. Several witnesses reported seeing Krista enter the apartment complex alone, unescorted, and without anyone else accompanying her. This led the police to believe that the perpetrator had entered the apartment complex before Krista, just before she arrived. It was suspected that the perpetrator knew which floor she would go to and where to wait for her. After a while, the Krista Waninger murder case yielded no more clues. Public interest in the case also waned, as no similar attacks occurred afterward. People began to calm down, and Krista's case gradually faded into oblivion, largely because her family lived far away in another country. Despite efforts to understand the situation, it was difficult to generate significant interest in the case. Krista's mother and sister actively distributed flyers with her picture in the hope of attracting potential witnesses, but their efforts did not advance the investigation. The investigation into Krista's murder had stalled for 10 months until an anonymous witness contacted a local newspaper. Using a false name, He asked to speak to the editor. The man claimed to be the brother of Krista's killer and offered to sell information to the newspaper for a large sum of money. The journalist who took the call felt that the man's story was more than just a scam to capitalize on the tragedy. Believing that the witness might have accurate information, he decided to contact the police. The journalist carefully communicated with the man, promising to collect the necessary funds to pay him in advance by the evening. They agreed to contact him later to discuss the details. After the call, the journalist went to the police station to report the unusual conversation. The police showed interest in the case, and the journalist agreed to work with them, using special equipment to monitor the incoming call. The anonymous caller contacted the journalist at 19:05. During this call, 2 police officers listened in and recorded the conversation. They were able to locate the source of the call. Several police officers then went to the address provided, where they found a 32-year-old man using the phone booth. His name was Guido Pieri. When they saw him, the police immediately recognized that he matched the police sketch of the suspect. He was arrested and searched, and their suspicions were confirmed when they found a 30-centimeter long knife in his jacket pocket, similar to the weapon used in the attack on Krista. The police believed they had the right suspect. Unfortunately, further examination revealed that Krista was not killed with this knife. Guido Pieri insisted from the beginning that he was only trying to profit from the story, but he was unable to provide any clear information. When the police searched his home, they found another knife, but no blood, and it could not be linked to Krista's wounds. Disturbing notes were found in Guido's home, including 5 notebooks detailing gruesome murders of women. The most alarming was the final story, which was very similar to the case of Krista Waninger. The story included specific details that had not been made public and were known only to the perpetrator, raising suspicions against Guido. Guido Pieri grew up in a family with 4 brothers and 3 sisters. From an early age, he had a strong passion for adventure painting. However, while in vocational school, he decided to drop out and start working, especially after struggling to finish 8th grade 3 times. Although he was not unintelligent, he had obvious problems with self-control. By the age of 18, he was employed as a mechanic in a construction company, maintaining a fleet of equipment. After 10 years, Guido married a much older woman. During this time, he pursued his passion for painting, dreaming of becoming an artist. In February, Guido moved to Paris to pursue this dream, but unfortunately, his efforts ended in disappointment. In his diary, he explained his feelings in detail. It was clear that Guido was a deeply creative individual with a unique perspective on life, but he struggled to manage the challenges he faced and find his own path. He lacked the courage and motivation needed to overcome these obstacles. As a result, Guido moved back to Rome, ended his marriage, and took a job as a secretary at the Institute, where he worked until he was 63. His diaries reveal a disillusioned man full of ambitions and ideas that he was unable to turn into reality. When the police questioned him about the notes they discovered during the search, Guido explained that they were ideas for a future novel, as he longed to write a book. When reviewing the notes, the police noticed many similarities to the real-life case of Krista Waninger. Details of the crime scene and descriptions of the people involved closely resembled the apartment building and surrounding area where Krista was murdered. This raised questions about whether these accounts referred to her murder, which aroused suspicions among the police. Guido led a seemingly normal life, frequenting upscale restaurants and bars. However, he remained on the police radar, having been spotted at several other violent crime scenes unrelated to Krista. Unfortunately, he did not confess or provide any evidence of his innocence. At that time, witnesses who had seen a suspicious man in a blue jacket leaving the apartment building after hearing Krista scream had not yet testified. 3 of the 4 witnesses identified him as Guido. Despite ongoing questioning and suspicion, no physical evidence was found linking him to the crime. The police decided to return all the confiscated diaries belonging to Guido, and he was released. During this time, Krista's sister pushed for the investigation to be reopened. The police reviewed all relevant information, but this lead did not yield any results. Guido remained the prime suspect, but he did not confess. Despite having no evidence to present, the police continued to investigate and put pressure on him. Surprisingly, Guido Pieri went to the police station and confessed to killing Krista Waninger. He was arrested, and it took a year before the trial began. Despite his confession, he was acquitted due to a lack of sufficient evidence. His lawyer argued that Guido had mental health problems and pointed out that he refused to confess again. By this time, he had been officially diagnosed with schizophrenia, which led the police to consider his confession unreliable. There were 2 more hearings. In both trials, Guido Pieri was found guilty, but he was released on bail due to his mental condition. Guido later changed his story, claiming that he had been at the scene of the murder by accident and denied any guilt. In addition, Guido destroyed his own notebooks, containing disturbing notes that could have been used against him. During the psychiatric evaluation, he was found to be insane. Therefore, the court could only order Guido to undergo treatment for schizophrenia. Despite his crime, he was allowed to go free without any apparent motive. For a long time, he was considered a threat to society, but there was not enough evidence to prove it. He was eventually released and deemed harmless, much to the shock of Krista's family. Sadly, Krista's relatives were never able to obtain justice or see Guido incarcerated. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Laura Salmon. On May 31, 1984, an elderly farmer named Johnny Muckle came to the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. He reported that he had been driving through his field and noticed something unusual. As he got closer, he discovered a girl lying dead in the field, her face covered in blood. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police without disturbing the scene. Several officers, including the sheriff, accompanied him back to the scene where they found the body of a blonde girl. She was wearing only her bra, as the rest of her clothing had been removed. The perpetrator had covered her with 2 pairs of jeans, one for women and one for men, and wrapped a black jacket around her upper body, with one sleeve tied tightly around her neck. The police found the entire scene unusual. They had never encountered anything like it in their many years of service. The autopsy revealed that the victim was clutching her underwear in her right hand, and her jeans were identified as part of her clothing. She had suffered multiple injuries, the most serious of which was to her head. Interestingly, Johnny reported that the girl's body was discovered near an abandoned quarry. This location is known to attract students from nearby educational institutions who often gather there to drink and socialize. It is possible that one of these gatherings ended in a violent incident, which is currently under investigation. While this information guides the investigation, it also expands the list of potential suspects to hundreds of juveniles. In order to focus on more specific suspects, additional data collection and analysis are required. The victim was identified as Laura Salmon, 18, a freshman at Middle Tennessee State University located in her hometown of Murfreesboro. Laura attended Oakland High School, where her mother, Lorene Mackey, taught English. Her parents were divorced at the time. Just days before the incident, Laura had moved in with her father because the school year had ended. She missed him and was going to spend part of the holiday with him. Laura was a kind, attractive, and sociable girl who enjoyed attending lively gatherings. As a young woman, she was crowned Little Miss Murfreesboro and showcased her acting talents in summer plays at the local theater. Laura was also very intelligent, graduating with honors and planning to continue her studies at college to build a solid career. She had started attending the local university, in the fall of 1983, just 6 months before the tragic incident. She had just started a relationship with her boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley. Laura was well-liked and had no enemies who wanted to harm her. Police believed she may have been a random murder victim. An autopsy was completed on June 2, 1984. The forensic expert found at least 2 blunt force injuries to her head, likely caused by a rock or similar object. These blows resulted in brain damage. Laura suffered fatal head injuries from the repeated attacks. She lost consciousness and died within 10 minutes, and even immediate medical attention could not save her. Initially, there were concerns about the possibility that Laura had been abused, but the forensic results found no signs of this. However, the expert pointed out that Laura had been consensual in her intimate relations within 24 to 48 hours before the incident. It is believed that she may have had a boyfriend. It is possible the attacker staged the crime scene to mislead the police. Forensic teams collected samples from the clothing covering her body for further analysis. Additionally, tire tracks found in the area could belong to either Laura's car or the attacker's car, prompting the police to examine Laura's vehicle. One of the officers knew Laura. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store he frequented after work. He recognized her car and decided to check the store's parking lot. On June 3, he found Laura's car abandoned in the lot, which was subsequently taken to the lab for examination. When the forensic team examined the interior, they found no fingerprints, not even Laura's. This was unusual, indicating that the car may have been thoroughly cleaned, possibly by the perpetrator. However, they did find dirt in the wheel wells and some hairs of unknown origin under the floor mat. These samples were collected for analysis. The soil found in the wheel wells matched the particles on the floor mats of the driver and passenger areas, and when compared to the materials found at the crime scene, they matched as well. Evidence clearly showed that the tire tracks near the crime scene belonged to Laura's car, suggesting that the killer was not a random stranger, but someone who knew her well, including her workplace. As police gathered and analyzed the information, they interviewed people close to Laura, starting with her mother, Lorene Mackey. Lorene immediately suspected her daughter's boyfriend, David, because she was aware of the toxic nature of their relationship and had never supported it. She described David as jealous and possessive, almost like a stalker. Lorene noted that many of Laura's encounters with David ended in arguments. This was extremely distressing to her, as she felt her daughter was ignoring important warning signs. Despite the efforts of several family members, including Laura's father, they were unable to convince Laura that David was a danger. Tragically, this may have contributed to Laura's early death. At that time, personal relationship issues were not considered matters for the police to handle. People generally believed that they should resolve such matters themselves. The police spoke with Lorene's mother and then met with her father and stepmother. Lorene stated that she had last spoken to Laura on the morning of May 31, just a few days before the body was discovered. On that day, Laura had slept over at her friend Trina's house, and they were together until late at night. On the morning of June 1, the girls slept in and woke up around 9 a.m. They then left. Laura went to work at the store, where she was scheduled to work until lunchtime. Trina was supposed to replace her at 2 p.m., after which Laura planned to check her semester grades and then go swimming at her grandmother's pool. However, when Trina arrived at the store around 1 p.m., she discovered that Laura was not there. Her coworkers said that Laura had taken time off and left early. Laura was wearing the same jeans that were found on her body. Laura's car was discovered at work at 3:30 p.m., which was unusual since she was not there. It is unclear when she arrived because there were no surveillance cameras at that time. Laura's father, Salman, last saw his daughter and confirmed that she was with her friend Trina that day. The two girls had been friends since childhood and worked together at the grocery store. Trina helped piece together the events of May 31 and supported Laura's family's concerns. She knew that Laura was afraid of her boyfriend David because he was harassing her, making him a suspect in Laura's murder. Laura had begun talking to other guys because she wanted to break up with David, but was too afraid to tell him directly. She tried to avoid him to signal that their relationship was over. Laura often expressed feeling unsafe around her ex-boyfriend, who was violent towards her, and her fears were well-founded. David Kyle Gilley's behavior became increasingly cruel, making the situation unacceptable. Several co-workers at the grocery store confirmed that Laura and David had a very bad relationship. Witnesses reported that David would come to the store to accuse Laura of cheating and harass her. He used harsh words and even resorted to hitting Laura. David was very possessive. When questioned at the police station, he claimed that Laura was swimming with her grandmother and that he had not seen her. He did not mention their previous encounter before the incident. Witnesses reported seeing Laura with a man in her car that day. After they left together, Laura's car reappeared in the parking lot, but she was missing. No one saw her arrive or park, suggesting that the killer may have left the car there. The police had no evidence against David, so they released him. Unfortunately, the conversation with him was not recorded. A week later, David was questioned again, this time about the last day he spent with Laura. David said that they had a good time on May 30 and that they had not argued. They left Laura's grandmother's apartment at around 9 p.m. in his car, parked behind a church, and were intimate. He then drove her back to her grandmother's house, and they left at around 2 a.m. in separate cars. David went to work, believing that Laura had returned to her father's house. He left work at 7 a.m. and went straight to bed, waking up at 3 p.m. He claimed that he was home during the murder, and his father supported his alibi. The next interview took place in July. David added to his previous claim that after they were intimate, they used jeans in his car to clean up. This detail seemed odd, and the inconsistencies in his testimony raised suspicions, but there was still no evidence against him. The police worked to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the murder. They discovered that on May 30, Laura had been dancing with a man at a nightclub. It was later revealed that the man was one of Laura's friends and that he had a verified alibi for the time of the murder. A new suspect emerged when a Nashville woman reported being abused. During the attack, the attacker mentioned a woman named Laura, threatening to hurt her like he did Laura if she resisted or reported him. During the investigation, police discovered that the suspect also attended the same college as Laura, frequented the gym where she worked out, and often saw her at campus parties. He was also near the school on the day of the murder. Police compared hair found in Laura's car to that of the new suspect. However, DNA analysis at the time was insufficient to make a definitive match. The new suspect was eventually ruled out because the hair samples found in Laura's car did not match him, and he had a solid alibi. As the investigation continued to stall, Laura's parents grew increasingly concerned that the search for the killer might be stalled as well. Concerns about the investigation were confirmed over time due to several police errors. The crime scene was not properly secured, and police collected evidence without using gloves, which could have contaminated it. When Laura's father arrived at the area where his daughter's body was found, he noticed her necklace, which the police had overlooked. He took it to the police station, further cementing his belief that the police had been careless in their investigation. Sadly, Laura's family was right. It took 16 years for the investigation to progress. The case became one of many unsolved cold cases. It wasn't until 2000 that a police team was formed to reinvestigate Laura's case and finally identify her killer. For police officer Dan Goodwin, it was a personal matter because he knew Laura. They had been in college together and had gone to the movies with friends just 4 days before her death. During his first meeting with Laura's family, Goodwin promised to uncover the truth behind her death. Eventually, the police gained access to advanced technology that allowed them to re-examine old evidence. They sent the clothing found on Laura's body to a lab to create a DNA profile. While reviewing Laura's file, the police found a note that contradicted the alibi of Laura's ex-boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley, who claimed he was home at the time of Laura's murder. It was discovered that the police had a witness who contradicted David's alibi. During this time, David's stepfather insisted that he was home, but a woman reported seeing him in a car near the field where Laura's body was found. The woman was located and re-interrogated, confirming her previous account from years earlier and providing the police with fairly accurate details. She stated that the young man she saw driving Laura's car that day had a blank expression on his face and closely resembled the photo of David that had appeared in the newspaper at the time of the murder. In the new investigation, police spoke to Laura's friends, who described David's anxious behavior after the incident. They noted that he appeared to have no remorse for Laura's death and even spoke arrogantly about her. A new witness revealed that at a party, David confessed to her that he had committed the murder during a private conversation. He had threatened her and expressed a desire to attack her, warning that he would harm her if she did not comply. Fortunately, another friend intervened and scared David away. Meanwhile, forensic experts tested the evidence on the clothing and discovered that the blood was Laura's. The only remaining question was about the semen found on the jeans. They needed a biological sample from David for comparison. Unfortunately, he had moved away, so the police began looking for him. David had relocated to Florida in 1986. He was twice divorced, had a daughter, and worked for the Department of Public Works. David also had a criminal record that included abuse, attempted burglary, and resisting arrest, fitting the profile of someone who might have harmed Laura. After meeting with the police, David significantly changed his story. He denied being intimate with Laura the day before the murder and claimed that he had never been jealous or used physical violence. The police obtained a warrant for David's arrest, allowing them to collect all the necessary documents for DNA analysis and comparison with the evidence. On May 31, 2000, laboratory tests confirmed that the blood on David's jeans belonged to both Laura and him. It was likely that he had been wearing the jeans during the crime, as both Laura's and his blood were found on the fabric. The police had suspected David from the beginning of the investigation, and it took months of additional testing to confirm their theories. Unfortunately, it took 17 years to officially prove his guilt. In November 2001, David attended another interview where he contradicted his previous statements. He claimed that he had never had a serious relationship with Laura, describing their interactions as light flirting. He asserted that he had never affected her emotionally or physically, was not jealous, and did not control her actions. This was in direct contradiction to the accounts of many witnesses who disagreed with him. His only admission was that the jeans found on Laura's body were likely his, but he claimed that he had accidentally left them there. These inconsistencies in his testimony provided enough evidence to charge him. By the time the interview ended, David realized he was in trouble and asked for a lawyer. He was arrested on the night of November 14, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After the murder, procedural issues arose because David was under 18 at the time of the crime. His case, which involved an adult, was transferred to juvenile court. In 2002, preliminary hearings were held to decide whether the case should be transferred to adult district court. On February 1, 2002, it was finally decided that he would be tried as an adult. During the next preliminary hearing, challenges arose regarding the selection of witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecutor's office wanted several of Laura's friends, as well as her mother, to testify before the grand jury. After lengthy discussions, the witness list was finalized. The trial began 22 years after Laura Salmon's death. On August 26, 2006, David Kyle Gilley had been in prison for 5 years awaiting trial. Multiple witnesses testified, revealing the extent of the cruelty he had shown toward Laura throughout their relationship. Disturbing incidents were recounted. Several witnesses reported hearing David make threats out of jealousy. He assaulted Laura, causing her injuries, including a broken nose, and even threatened the dormitory manager at her college. On one occasion, after a heated argument, He nearly threw Laura down a flight of stairs, but the presence of witnesses may have prevented him from causing serious injury. In high school, classmates witnessed David's abusive behavior toward Laura. He assaulted her by slamming her head into a metal cabinet, pushing her against a wall, and slapping her. When Laura expressed a desire to break up, David locked her in a cabinet and banged on the door from the outside. Others heard him threaten to kill her if they broke up. One evening, while playing near the quarry where Laura was later found, friends saw David break her nose by slamming her face into the hood of a car. One of Laura's friends reported the abuse to the police, but there was no record of any law enforcement action taken. Laura felt her complaint was ignored, even when she went to the police station with a broken nose. Laura wanted to end her relationship with David, but he sent her letters threatening to kill her if she tried. He was extremely possessive, believing that if she was not his, she did not deserve to live. Laura's mother did not know the full extent of David's cruelty, but tried to persuade her daughter to break up with him, feeling that their relationship was unhealthy. She suspected that jealousy may have been the motive behind the eventual murder. Laura was a year older than David, and he became increasingly jealous as she started college and moved to a school where she made new friends and socialized with other boys. The prosecutor's office reported that David was with Laura on the day of the attack, while she was on her way to her grandmother's house to swim. The attacker intended to lure her to a remote area to punish her for seeing another boy. There, they got into a fight, during which David wrestled her to the ground and pinned her down, using his body to restrain her. He then began hitting her on the head with whatever object he could find, which unfortunately included several large stones, causing the young girl to suffer serious injuries and die. In response, the defense argued that the genes found on Laura contained DNA from David, Laura, and an unidentified person, suggesting that David may have been framed. The attorney emphasized that David had criticized the police for bias during the investigation. David's brother testified on his behalf, providing a strong alibi. During cross-examination, police discovered that David's brother had been in contact with David while he was in prison. The brothers discussed ways to get David released, leading to the creation of an elaborate alibi that was exposed at the hearing. David Kyle Gilley was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He is currently incarcerated, and his defense attorneys have filed multiple appeals against the verdict, all of which have been rejected. Initially, the murder of Laura Salmon did not attract significant public attention. 4 months after the horrific incident, the tragedy was widely reported in the media. The case sparked a national discussion about domestic violence. Since 1984, various measures have been taken to strengthen protections for women facing violence in their relationships. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Laurel Mitchell. Laurel Jean Mitchell was born on May 24, 1958. She grew up in a loving and supportive environment with her 2 younger siblings, raised by their parents. The Mitchell family was very friendly, and many neighbors considered them the ideal American family. Despite the challenges they faced, the family remained close and worked together to overcome difficulties. From an early age, Laurel excelled in school and was part of a very religious family. She attended church regularly, with her parents and later with her siblings. Laurel was also creative and talented. She joined the local choir and practiced weekly. She achieved much success, performing with the choir in neighboring cities and participating in various community events. Committed to helping others, Laurel worked at a church camp near her home. Many of the attendees knew her well, having watched her grow up. Laurel was described as a friendly, positive girl, with a gentle yet strong personality. Those close to her believed that she had a bright future ahead. supported by her dedication to her family and community. On the morning of August 6, 1975, Laurel spent time caring for her younger brother and sister while waiting for their parents to return from work. In the afternoon, she was scheduled to go to church camp. Laurel left home around 2 p.m., said goodbye to everyone without incident, and arrived at camp on time, as usual. She was scheduled to work until around 10 p.m. that evening and then planned to go to a local park to relax with friends, which was half a mile from the church. After work, a friend of Laurel's offered to drive her to the park, but she declined, preferring to walk and enjoy the fresh air. About 10 minutes into her walk, she met some friends across the street who were having a good time. Although they waved goodbye, Laurel did not join them because she did not want to be late. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Meanwhile, her friends were waiting for her at the park. After 20 minutes had passed without Laurel, they began to worry. It was unusual for her to be late, as she was known to be punctual and usually arrived early. Concerned, her friends decided to wait a little longer, thinking that she might simply be running late for church. They waited for her, but after half an hour, they grew impatient and felt a little annoyed by her tardiness. Unable to wait any longer, they decided to go out and have fun without her. Meanwhile, they worried that something might have happened to her. Laurel's family was not worried at first because she had told them that she was going to meet her friends after work and planned to return around midnight, which was her curfew. Her parents allowed her to go out, but as midnight approached and she still had not returned, they began to worry. Both her mother and father became concerned, as did her friends. They realized that Laurel's behavior was unusual. Worried about her well-being, her parents decided to take action instead of waiting. Her mother immediately began trying to find out what had happened to her daughter. Knowing that 17-year-old Laurel was very close to her friends, most of whom lived nearby, her parents decided to contact them despite the late hour, as their worries had grown too great. Laurel's best friend lived right across the street, and they often spent time together. So when Laurel wasn't at her friend's house, her parents were surprised. At that time, her friend had returned home, which raised their concerns. After talking to her friend, Laurel's parents were shocked to learn that she had not gone to the park to meet them and that they had gone for a walk without her. Her parents searched for Laurel along the path she would have taken, but found no sign of her. They planned to go home, hoping that she would be back by then, but she did not return. Worried, the family began calling everyone they knew who might have seen Laurel, despite the late hour. Most people were sympathetic, but unfortunately, no one knew where she was. They eventually decided to call the police to report her missing. Sadly, the police responded with the usual excuses, saying that since Laurel was 17 and was supposed to be with friends, she may have run away due to a conflict with her parents or simply been with someone else. They speculated that she might have had too much to drink and was unable to return home. However, her parents insisted that this behavior was completely out of character for Laurel. Laurel spent most of her time at home and at church, but the police did not listen to their concerns. Determined to find Laurel, her parents and others spent nearly an hour at the police station trying to convince the officers that she would never have missed a meeting with friends or broken curfew. Eventually, the police seemed to take action. By this time, a large group of townspeople were anxious to know what had happened to Laurel. Everyone in the community knew each other, and the idea that a young girl could be in danger in such a quiet town, where nothing like this had ever happened, was shocking. Laurel's parents made a phone call, and a crowd gathered outside the police station, ready to help. Despite the late hour, the people were determined to search for Laurel along with the police. First, they checked the camp near the church, along the route Laurel had taken. However, they found no sign of her along the entire path she might have followed. Then the group split up and searched the city until dawn, but unfortunately, they still found no clues. By 10:30 a.m., the search of the homes of Laurel's friends, whom she was supposed to meet, was nearly complete. The hope that she had simply gone out to have fun had evaporated. Naturally, There was interest in the missing girl's relatives. The Mitchell family had made extensive efforts to identify any potential suspects in Laurel's vicinity. However, they ruled them out, one by one. Laurel had a good social circle, with no signs of cruelty or criminality. Her friends could provide no leads for the investigation. There were no suspicious boyfriends or manipulative individuals in her life, as she had never dated anyone or even thought about boys. There were no jealous suitors who could harm her. Rumors began to spread, and the local community started to pressure the police for answers. Eventually, the police learned that Laurel had met a group of friends about 10 minutes earlier and had passed by them. They reported that they had seen nothing unusual. Laurel seemed happy and was not being followed. So what could have happened to her? A few kilometers north of the city, a man was fishing with his son on the river. Everything seemed calm until he noticed something suspicious floating downstream. Out of curiosity, he decided to row his boat closer. To his horror, he discovered that it was the body of a girl. The man was terrified, thinking that she might have had an accident and drowned. He believed he could still save her, so he pulled her body into the boat and tried to help. However, he soon realized that she was too cold, despite the warm weather. When all his efforts failed, he brought her body to shore with his son. He spotted a passing car and asked the driver to call for help. At the time, Laurel Mitchell's disappearance had not yet been officially reported. Since she had no identification, it was difficult to identify her. The police responded to the call. It turned out that the man and his son were not from the area and did not know Laurel. The police noticed a ring with her initials engraved on her finger. A few hours later, Laurel was officially reported missing, and her initials confirmed her identity. Her parents were able to identify her immediately. Initially, there was an assumption that she may have accidentally fallen off the bridge, slipped, and drowned, possibly due to not knowing how to swim or being intoxicated. However, her parents quickly dismissed these thoughts. They knew that swimming was a regular part of Laurel's training. She had always loved water and enjoyed swimming since childhood, so she could have swum out of the reservoir if she had accidentally fallen in. Additionally, her family and friends confirmed that she had not been drinking. She had not intended to cross the bridge that night, as it was not on her route, making it unlikely that she had accidentally ended up there. Despite this, the police remained skeptical of the family's beliefs. Laurel was found in a large river with a strong current. In some areas, the current is so powerful that even professional swimmers avoid it. According to the police, Laurel may have fallen into the water or gone swimming and become a victim of the current. She may have been swept away and been unable to handle the situation. This theory is supported by the existence of areas marked as too dangerous to swim. Forensic experts were quick to dismiss the police's explanation. Laurel had numerous bruises indicating that she had been beaten, an apparent case of violent death. Many of her injuries appeared to be defensive wounds, particularly on her arms and upper chest. Her face and head were severely injured, suggesting that she had been struck with a blunt object. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, indicating an attempt to conceal the evidence by dumping her body in the river. The body had been submerged in water for a long time, causing most of the evidence to wash away. The remaining traces could not be thoroughly analyzed because DNA testing was still in its early stages, which caused the investigation to stall. Although the police had some evidence in the form of suspicious biological traces, they were too small to be of any use. All of the items recovered, such as Laurel's clothes, shoes, and underwear that showed these traces, were eventually stored. At the funeral, the church was so crowded that many attendees had to stand outside. People expressed their condolences to Laurel's family and hoped that the case would be solved soon. The investigation soon stalled and only made progress a few months later when an anonymous witness called the police from a public phone. She claimed to know what had happened to Laurel, but when the police began asking questions, she abruptly hung up and was never found again. The police made a public appeal to find the girl who had called them. They assured her that her identity would be kept confidential and that she would be safe, providing any protection she might need. They urged her to contact them again and share any information she had. To encourage her, they even offered a reward of $50,000, a substantial sum at the time. Despite this, the girl did not call back. Unfortunately, the reward led to trouble, as the police received some false information, wasting resources on unnecessary investigations. 6 months after Laurel's death, a woman contacted the police. She lived across the street from where Laurel had walked to the park that evening. She reported seeing Laurel at 10:15 p.m., the same time she was returning from work. While she was at home, she heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like a car had stopped suddenly in front of her house, followed by the screams of young people. When she looked out the window, she saw one of the trunks slam shut. Laurel, who had disappeared from view for a moment, was seen by a housewife. The housewife noticed a red car with strange young men inside, who quickly drove away. Although she could not see the faces or the license plate, she provided a description of the car. It was a bright red car, quite recognizable at the time. The police were very interested in this information and began investigating all the car owners matching that description. However, for a month, they found no clues, much to the frustration of the police and Laurel's family. The investigation hit a dead end again. Decades later, in the early 2010s, advances in technology and methods, including genetic analysis, allowed for a more thorough examination of the available evidence. Profiling techniques were also used, leading to the creation of a psychological profile of the suspect. FBI agents were even brought in to assist. The profiler suggested that the suspect was likely a young man who lived in or near the area, had a history of violent crime, and possibly a criminal record. Despite these efforts, the investigation into Laurel's case made little progress. The DNA samples from the evidence were too limited to be analyzed comprehensively, hampering the police's efforts to solve the crime. During this time, a team was formed to tackle unsolved cases. Finally, the case of Laurel Mitchell came to the attention of her elderly parents. They once again expressed their desire to confront the brutal criminal who had beaten their innocent daughter to death. The police chose to restart the investigation, ignoring all the controversial conclusions from over 30 years ago. Sadly, Laurel's parents died before the police could answer their long-standing questions. As of 2012, the culprit remains unidentified. After the tragedy, Laurel's brother and sister were determined to continue their fight for justice. They believed that the media could help promote their efforts, so they issued several news reports about the investigation, which had been ongoing for nearly 4 years. A few months into their media campaign, they began to see progress with the police. A woman who had lived in the area in 1975 and was the same age as Laurel came forward to share her story. About a week after Laurel's murder, she had met a man named John Wayne Lehman at a party, and they had begun a long-term relationship. At another party, John confessed to her about a traumatic incident that had occurred that summer. He revealed that he had witnessed his friend attacking a girl on the street and felt helpless because he could not intervene. John gave a detailed account of the crime, but maintained that he did not kill Laurel. Instead, he claimed that it was his friend. At the time, she did not believe him. When she went to the police station and repeated what John had said, the police became interested. The information she provided about the attack and murder included details that had not been reported in the media, raising suspicions. Despite this, the investigation remained challenging. The woman mentioned that she had broken up with John shortly after his confession and that she did not know about his current situation. He was not listed in the police database, indicating that he had no legal problems. The police sought to identify John's friend. The woman struggled to remember her friend's name. To help her recall, the police provided her with a list of former suspects and potential witnesses in the case. She recognized the name Fred Bandy Jr. 2 years after Laurel's death, a young man came to the police station, stating that he had met Fred, who had no stable home, job, or education. He described Fred as having an anger problem that he could not control. During one of their meetings, Fred confided in him that a friend named John had attacked a girl on the street for no reason. When the girl fought back, Fred became angry and started hitting her. He continued to attack her even after she passed out and fell to the ground. Fred claimed that he lost control at that point, which ultimately led to the girl's death. To cover up their crime, they dumped the girl's body in the river. At the time, the police did not take the young man's testimony seriously because he could not provide the girl's name, making it impossible to verify his account. Initially, the police ignored the situation, but eventually remembered it. However, they did not take action because they could not verify his testimony. After reviewing the report, the police discovered that John Wayne Lehman and Fred Bandy Jr. were involved in the case. Now, the police decided to take a closer look at the main suspects. However, at this time, they still had no information about John or Fred. Finally, the police had advanced technology that could analyze even the smallest traces. In 2019, they decided to test all the evidence collected from Laurel's murder, including her clothes, shoes, underwear, and a ring. Contrary to expectations, the testing process took nearly a year, even with these improved methods. In February 2020, a major breakthrough occurred when forensic scientists discovered microscopic traces on Laurel's clothing that had gone unnoticed for decades. The authorities had enough samples from Fred, who had a history of violent crimes, and his DNA was stored in a database. They needed time to compare these samples. Unfortunately, the initial results only showed an 80% match, which was not conclusive enough, so the investigation continued. After conducting further analysis using different methods, they achieved a near 100% match with Fred's samples. Finally, in 2023, the decision was made to arrest Fred Bandy Jr. and his friend John Wayne Lehman. Police noted that Fred had a history of 3 violent crimes, all targeting young girls, but he had only been convicted of one of these crimes. Fred served a short sentence and was released. He has now admitted to attacking Laurel Mitchell and mentioned that his friend John owned a red car in 1975. He tried to blame John but could not explain why only his DNA was found on Laurel's body. Both men were arrested nearly 48 years after Laurel's murder. Laurel's younger brother and sister struggled to understand how the killers were able to live freely while the police failed to catch them all these years. It was expected that they would accuse each other. Fred blamed John for everything, while John insisted that Fred was responsible for abusing and killing Laurel and drowning her. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that his fear of Fred had prevented him from intervening or speaking up until now. After hearing arguments from both sides, the jury reached a decision. Within an hour, they found Fred Bandy Jr. guilty of first-degree murder. At the time, Fred was 69 years old. At the sentencing hearing that followed, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. It is important to note that Fred was tried under a 1975 law. At that time, he could have faced life in prison with the possibility of parole or the death penalty. However, the death penalty has since been abolished in that state. As a result, Fred will spend the rest of his life in prison. John Wayne Lehman, who was 68 years old when he was arrested in Indiana, negotiated a deal with the prosecution by pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Because of his cooperation, John was sentenced to only 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. In exchange for this leniency, John had to testify for the prosecution during the trial. After the murderers were convicted, Laurel's 62-year-old younger sister released balloons into the sky that read, "We got him." This allowed the family to celebrate a long overdue victory for justice. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, The case of Mary Catherine Edwards. Before the advent of modern DNA research techniques, building a criminal database was challenging, making the investigation and tracing of crimes less effective. However, recent technological advances have led to the development of sophisticated tools that can help identify criminals who have been on the run for years. Now, no one can evade justice. On January 14, 1995, the Edwards family had a planned gathering. Saturday dinners together were a cherished tradition for the parents and their two daughters. So, when one of the twin sisters, Mary, was missing, it raised immediate concerns. Mary Catherine, 31, did not attend the dinner and did not answer calls from her family members, who were trying to reach her from the restaurant. Frustrated, they decided to go to Mary's home in Beaumont, Texas, where she was living at the time. When Mary's mother arrived at the house, she became worried upon finding the door unlocked. Inside, they heard running water but received no response to their calls. The bathroom was flooded, and Mary was discovered unresponsive in distressing conditions. Her sister Allison immediately called the police to report that she had found Mary's lifeless body. The sisters were twins, raised in Texas, and were the only children in the Edwards family. The loss of one was a devastating shock. They had always been inseparable, kind-hearted, and dedicated to helping others, especially children. After graduating high school, both sisters pursued careers as teachers and worked at the same school. They were so similar that students and faculty often confused them. At the time of her death, Mary was 31 years old and thriving in her career. Known for her bright personality, her murder sparked widespread outrage and anger. Mary was cherished by her students, many of whom felt a close bond with her. Hundreds of children, relatives, and friends attended her funeral, with many students mourning the loss of a woman who had been a vital source of support in their challenging lives. Some were in tears upon hearing the news of her passing. Parents urged detectives to take action against the criminal responsible for the brutal death of Mary. The community was horrified by the circumstances surrounding her death. Mary was found handcuffed in the bathroom, indicating that she had been abused. The bathtub was filled with blood, showing that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by defensive wounds on her hands and body. Traces of the assault suggested that it occurred in her bedroom, where evidence was found on the bedding. Investigators suspected that Mary might have known her attacker, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. The townspeople, who knew Mary well, cooperated with detectives, eager to identify the person responsible for such a horrific crime. Given the brutality and circumstances, detectives focused their investigation on her close acquaintances, believing there could be a personal motive. It was initially thought that Mary might have drowned, but an autopsy revealed that her lungs did not contain enough water, suggesting that water only entered her lungs after she had died. The true cause of death was asphyxiation, as indicated by distinct marks on her neck, and injuries suggesting she had been tightly restrained with great force until she could no longer resist. Forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the crime scene by examining the victim's house, starting with the bathroom and then moving to the bedroom. They collected a significant amount of evidence. The most alarming item found was the Smith & Wesson handcuffs that the victim had been restrained with, which resembled those used by police. This discovery left law enforcement officials confused, raising suspicions about whether someone connected to the police or a security worker might have had a personal relationship with the victim. The emotional impact of the case was deeply felt by everyone involved. In the weeks following the crime, detectives attempted to trace the serial number of the handcuffs, but their efforts were unsuccessful. By this time, the primary suspect had shifted to David Perry, the ex-boyfriend of Mary. Even though Mary was attractive and sociable, she maintained a small circle of close friends and had a few ex-lovers. She dedicated most of her time to her work and her students, leaving little room for a personal life. It was discovered that David Perry was the only person who might have had keys to her house. This raised concerns that he could have been stalking her and visiting her home out of jealousy or revenge. David agreed to cooperate with the police and provide everything needed for the examination. While waiting for the results, detectives interviewed mutual acquaintances of the couple, and everyone described David as a completely harmless person, showing no signs of aggression. He had no prior criminal record, history of violent or abuse offenses. Additionally, David Perry presented solid evidence of his alibi. He was not even in town on the night of the murder, as confirmed by multiple witnesses. David fully cooperated with the investigation, voluntarily provided DNA samples, and did not exhibit any characteristics of a criminal. Forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA did not match, leading to his removal from the list of suspects. Unfortunately, that was where the investigation stalled. Others in the victim's close circle also did not fit the criminal profile and had solid alibis. Although investigators had a lot of materials for analysis, the forensic technology at the time was insufficient to make further progress. The unsuccessful search continued for years. The situation changed significantly 23 years later, in 2018, with the introduction of a DNA analysis method that utilized genealogy. This method allowed investigators to find potential matches by examining relatives of the suspected. Law enforcement turned to the GEDmatch program, which collects DNA from Americans who voluntarily submit their samples, creating a large database. This database was instrumental in solving long-standing unsolved cases. When Detective Brandon Bess was advised to revisit the old cases, he immediately recalled the unsolved murder of Mary Edwards, which had troubled him for years. In April 2020, DNA samples from the scene related to Mary were sent to a lab at Othram for analysis. Here, many matches were found with the relatives of the killer. This marked the beginning of building a family tree related to the suspect. The number of names that needed analysis was overwhelming, totaling several thousand individuals. At this point, the detective's wife, who had a keen interest in genealogy, decided to assist with the investigation. She dedicated her free time to carefully examining matches from this extensive list. This task required precision, as each name needed to be evaluated accurately to ensure their efforts were worthwhile. Additionally, the investigators reviewed the diaries of Mary. It was believed that the victim may have had an obsessive admirer who harmed her out of unrequited love. Despite a thorough examination of the diary entries following the crime, no significant leads were uncovered. They then chose to cross-reference the names mentioned in the diaries with those in the genealogical records. During this process, the surname Lapointe began to come to light. The first identified relative of the murderer was Shara Lapointe. When contacted, Shara revealed that she is a well-known expert in genealogy and genetics. With decades of experience in her field, Shara had previously worked on challenging cases. Notably, she successfully identified one of the women buried along a state highway in the infamous Texas Fields of Death. Now, she was eager to apply her expertise to help solve other crimes, including the mystery surrounding Mary Edwards' death. She was prepared to assist with the investigation, even though it meant examining her own family members, which could lead to unsettling discoveries. As she began her analysis, she felt a sense of dread while checking the backgrounds of her own siblings, aware that the results might have serious implications. She needed to review about 7,500 names. Each individual on this list was examined slowly, requiring her to gather and process information about them and their relatives before either adding them to the family tree or discarding them. This process took several hours for each person. Over 3 months, detectives and Shara Lapointe devoted all their free time to searching for the criminal. Eventually, they found a promising lead, a couple living in Beaumont who matched the profile of the murderer's family. They have 2 sons who attended Forest Park High School, the same school Mary attended as a child. This led to 2 main suspects, Michael Foreman and Clayton Foreman. Michael did not match the age profile for the time of the crime. After checking, He was found to have no criminal record or history of aggressive behavior, so he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Clayton's situation was different. He had known Mary Edwards from high school and was closer in age to her. Furthermore, he had a criminal record for abuse, making him a strong suspect. In 1981, a 19-year-old girl reported to the police that Clayton Foreman had tied her hands and abused her. The details of that crime were strikingly similar to the incident involving Mary that occurred nearly 15 years later, with the key difference being that the first victim survived. She had also attended Forest Park High School, while Clayton was a manager at that time. The incident was effectively concealed, leading to Clayton receiving a suspended sentence and a fine. At that time, there were no police databases containing DNA samples, and he was not required to provide any. This lack of evidence is why Clayton was not identified during the investigation into the death of Diana Coe, his girlfriend of 3 years, with whom he had been planning to marry. Although Diana described him as a nice guy, it seems she did not truly know him. Less than 3 months before their wedding, she discovered the details of his abuse charge, the suspended sentence, and the fine, prompting her to want to end their engagement. However, Clayton, a manipulative liar, convinced her that it was all a misunderstanding. He avoided discussing the issue but created a believable narrative. Diana, eager to believe him, prioritized her relationship over her safety, which turned out to be a mistake. They went ahead with the marriage despite warnings from her family. When Diana and Clayton were married for just over 11 years, Diana claimed that Clayton frequently lied about his significant financial issues. She also observed that he had an unusual obsession with police handcuffs and law enforcement tools, even hanging a pair of handcuffs from the rearview mirror of his car. By the time Mary was killed, Diana had already divorced Clayton. She recalled calling him in tears to share the news, but she was taken aback by his indifferent response. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened and then hung up. It became evident that he was likely not overly concerned about the situation. He was probably connected to the events that had transpired. The suspect was now 60 years old and no longer lived in Beaumont. He had been located in a small town called Reynoldsburg, Ohio, which had a population of a few thousand. At that time, Clayton was working as a driver. Investigators were able to find his address and all necessary information. Now they needed to collect his DNA for analysis. They set up surveillance on the suspect's house. A local police officer even took his trash, which was sent to a forensic lab. DNA from Clayton was discovered on a beer bottle found in the garbage. The match was nearly 100%. A significant finding indicated that the investigation was nearly complete after all these years. The next step was to confront the suspect. The detectives in charge of the case traveled to Ohio and devised a plan to lure Clayton into a trap. Since he was a driver, they decided to approach him about a fictitious lost item that a client was supposedly searching for. On April 29, 2021, Clayton was summoned to the police precinct under the pretense of discussing a lost wallet. He agreed to come in voluntarily. For the first time in 26 years since a brutal murder, the suspected perpetrator was in the interrogation room. The detectives informed him about the murder of Mary Edwards. This news shocked him, but Clayton attempted to maintain his composure and initially denied knowing her. The detectives then showed him a wedding photo of his first wife, which included Mary and her twin sister as bridesmaids. This reminded him that Mary had indeed attended his wedding, as his wife had invited her. From the beginning, Clayton became visibly nervous as the detectives bombarded him with questions, revealing inconsistencies in his story. The detectives focused on his vulnerabilities, hoping to obtain a confession. Clayton insisted that he was unaware of Mary's death and claimed he had never been to her house. However, these statements were quickly refuted by his ex-wife. Despite the evidence, Clayton continued to deny any connection to Mary, which seemed to be a defensive reaction. He also denied having had intimate relations with her. But this was proven false when DNA samples matching his were found on her body. The realization that his DNA was discovered on her underwear and body left him bewildered. When he was arrested for the murder of Mary Edwards, he insisted on having a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the investigators. In a symbolic gesture of victory in this long-standing case, Clayton Foreman was handcuffed with the same type of cuffs that had been found on Mary. On March 12, 2024, over 29 years after the murder of Mary, Beaumont prosecutor Patrick Knauth and colleagues Mike Laird, Sonny Eckhart are ready to go to trial. The absence of a lawyer limited his options. Weak attempts to invoke the statute of limitations were unsuccessful. Clayton Foreman remained obstinately silent, neither confessing to the murder nor defending himself in court. For everyone involved in the investigation, emotions ran high. Cheryl LaPointe worried that the Clayton's family would resent her for participating in Clayton's arrest. Nevertheless, she received support, with others expressing concern for her safety leading up to the court hearings. Cheryl felt it was her duty to uncover the truth behind the cold-blooded murder, regardless of the personal costs. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution was the twin sister of Mary, Allison, who emotionally recounted how Clayton took away the person she loved most. Even after many years, she still bore a striking resemblance to her sister. During the trial, the prosecution brought in experts in genealogy and genetics, along with forensic laboratory specialists, to explain advanced DNA analysis techniques to the jurors. It was crucial to demonstrate that relative matching methods were reliable. The prosecution also focused on women who had been impacted by Clayton's actions. One of his former colleagues testified, sharing her observations of Clayton's unusual interest in police items at work. As his subordinate who handled documents, she often opened his desk drawer and found a pair of handcuffs. Although she found this odd, she didn't feel comfortable asking him about it, thinking it was just one of his quirks. The defendant's last wife shared how she discovered many dress-revealingly photos of underage girls. When she confronted Clayton about them, he responded calmly, saying he needed them to fantasize about taking away their innocence. He then laughed, dismissing it as a failed joke. Despite these disturbing revelations, Clayton continued to evade justice. One of his victims, Diana Coe, also attended the trial. She believed in his guilt and testified for the prosecution. It was during this time that she learned about another victim and realized the full extent of her ex-husband's cruelty. However, she pointed out that during their 11 years of marriage, he did not display such behaviors during their intimate moments and never crossed reasonable boundaries in their relationship. The first victim of Clayton's assault provided a detailed testimony about her experience. At the time, she was 19 years old and just months away from his wedding to Diana. One night, while driving home along a dirt road, her car got stuck. Suddenly, a civilian car pulled up, and a man claiming to be a police officer got out to offer her help. Feeling helpless, she accepted his assistance. However, as she stepped out of her car, he attacked her, tied her hands behind her back, and threatened her with a knife, saying he would slit her throat if she resisted. Clayton abused her. Surprisingly, afterward, he became more gentle, even driving her home. During the ride, he asked her not to cry, tried to comfort her, and expressed remorse for what had happened, claiming he didn't want to hurt her. This sudden shift in his demeanor was unsettling, especially considering the violent behavior he had just exhibited. At that time, she reported the incident to the police, but she was fearful. In court, she mentioned that she had forgiven her attacker and harbored no resentment towards him. She did not wish to harm Clayton. She believed he truly regretted his actions and would not reoffend. This perspective contributed to the light punishment he received. Now the first victim feels guilty, thinking that if Clayton had been imprisoned, it might have prevented the murder of Mary. Additionally, another victim testified against the defendant in court. Previously, she had been too afraid to contact law enforcement. This woman was also a friend of Diana, with whom she had stayed in touch during school. According to her testimony, Clayton attacked her one evening in 2006 while she was living alone in her apartment. Their past friendship allowed her to communicate with him, and he initially appeared to be an ordinary guy until his darker side emerged. One evening, Clayton visited her apartment and revealed that he was struggling financially and having marital issues. He was convincing, expressing a need for someone to understand and listen to him without judgment. Feeling sympathetic, she let him in. However, once she turned her back, he attacked her, held a gun to her head, threatened her, and assaulted her. He also used handcuffs during the attack. After it was over, Clayton surprisingly softened, apologized, and asked her not to report the incident to the police. She was scared, so she did not file charges against him. Following that night, Clayton did not reach out to her at all. It's important to note that his assaults were strikingly similar to a situation that could have occurred with Mary Edwards. Unlike previous victims, however, Mary fought back against his attack. The prosecution's witnesses testified for 7 days, while the defense presented no evidence. The defense attorney claimed that although Clayton might be an abuser, there was no proof that he was also a murderer. The defense suggested that Clayton's limited options might have influenced the situation. They acknowledged incidents involving other women, stating that Clayton typically did not act aggressively towards his wives, except for his fetish involving handcuffs. After hearing the prosecution's arguments, the jurors went to deliberate. They found Clayton Foreman guilty of murdering Mary Catherine Edwards. He received a life sentence. Clayton is eligible for parole in 2061. By then, he will be 101 years old. The jurors stated that it was not merely the testimonies from the traumatized women that led to their decision. Rather, it was the forensic experts' analysis of DNA evidence showing a nearly 100% match with Clayton Foreman's DNA that confirmed their conviction. The experts provided such a thorough explanation of the principles of modern forensic methodologies that it was difficult to find more convincing words. The convict also refused to admit his guilt until the end, even in the face of evidence regarding the abuse. Naturally, against this background, he never revealed the details of his heinous crime. Nevertheless, there remained even more horrifying questions. For many years, Clayton managed to skillfully hide his malicious nature from everyone around him, even from the women he lived closely with. Most people around him had no idea that he was capable of murder. Authorities suspected that he might have been involved in a significantly larger number of bloody crimes that remained unsolved. Clayton Foreman is in state prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2061, of course, if he lives that long. He continues to keep silent, while authorities do not lose hope that he will eventually reveal his secrets. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Paulson. Jennifer Paulson was born on June 23, 1979, in Washington, USA. She grew up in a close-knit family filled with love and warmth. Jennifer has 2 older brothers and shares a strong bond with them. She was a kind child who absorbed everything around her and made friends easily. As a result, she had a large circle of friends and could connect with anyone, regardless of their differences. Jennifer graduated from the Christian Academy, where she excelled academically. She was always eager to help her classmates who were struggling with their studies. In addition to her academic achievements, Jennifer was active in extracurricular activities. She published the weekly school news, tutored part-time, and participated in volleyball, basketball, and softball. A prominent feature of Jennifer and her family was their strong faith. She attended church services every Sunday. After graduating, she attended Seattle Pacific University, about an hour's drive from her parents' home. She set her sights on becoming a teacher, wanting to use her academic achievements to help her community. She excelled in school, earning a bachelor's degree in teaching and then a master's degree in education. During her time in college, Jennifer also volunteered with low-income families, focusing on helping children prepare for college. She has always believed that education is the key to building a successful future. After graduating, Jennifer sought employment and began her career as a substitute teacher at Pierce County Schools. Eager to advance her career, she worked hard to secure a permanent teaching position. She was soon hired by several schools, and in 2004, she became a full-time teacher at Hunt Middle School and Stanley Elementary School. In 2007, she joined Burney Elementary School, where she dedicated herself to teaching children with special needs and quickly became a favorite among the fifth graders. She believed that everyone deserved a chance at a better future, and helping them achieve that was her true calling as a teacher. She worked with students who faced serious challenges, including fifth graders who were still unable to read. Jennifer had an extremely busy schedule, balancing her teaching responsibilities with her efforts to support her students. While still attending college, she worked part-time at the cafeteria on campus. There, she met a new transfer student from another school named Jed Waits. He also worked at the cafeteria, and those who knew him well had nothing negative to say about him. One striking trait that people who don't know Jed will notice is his unusual style of dress. He often appears somber and frequently wears black. His friends believe that this preference for dark clothing stems from his creative eccentricity, which has been evident since a young age. Jed is an artist involved in a variety of creative activities. He has acted in plays, drawn cartoons for newspapers and yearbooks, and enjoys creating posters and flyers for youth groups. Jed is artistically gifted and can quickly come up with unique creative projects and execute them efficiently. This ability has earned him the respect of his teachers. Additionally, he leads his church's youth group and meets with students monthly to discuss spiritual topics and explore the Bible. Overall, he is a kind and optimistic person. When Jennifer met Jed, they worked together and socialized in the same group, where others often found Jed uncomfortable to talk to. His jokes were frequently considered inappropriate, dark, and confusing. Additionally, he was sometimes rude, even to Jennifer. Although there was no romantic relationship between them, it was clear that Jed had feelings for her. Jennifer, on the other hand, showed no interest in pursuing any relationship. She focused on her studies and had found a job that took up most of her free time. One day at school, Jed decided to express his feelings for Jennifer by asking her out. However, she reiterated what she had told many others before: she was not ready for a relationship until she had established her career. Jed struggled with the rejection, and in a moment of anger, he hit Jennifer, which caused a conflict between them. They resolved their differences amicably but chose to distance themselves, continuing their studies like other students. Both Jennifer and Jed graduated in 2003, with Jennifer earning a degree in special education and Jed earning a degree in English. Their friendship never recovered. In fact, they barely spoke to each other during their final years of school. After graduating from college, Jennifer moved back home with her family, found a job, and began saving money to buy her dream home. She was focused on her goals and wanted to be independent. However, an old acquaintance disrupted her plans. Somehow, Jed Waits discovered Jennifer's home phone number and called her for the first time 2 years after graduation. He said he had served in the National Guard in Kuwait and had just returned from a war zone. Jennifer was polite throughout the conversation and hoped he wouldn't call again, but from that day on, he started calling her frequently. At first, she ignored the calls, thinking he was just bored and contacting everyone, including her. However, she soon became concerned when Jed began calling multiple times a day, distracting and annoying her. When she asked their mutual friends, she learned that Jed didn't call anyone else. Realizing this made her feel uncomfortable. It seemed like he was obsessing over her, which was alarming. Jennifer told Jed that their relationship was impossible and asked him to stop contacting her. However, it seemed like he wasn't listening. Jed continued to call, forcing Jennifer to turn off her phone to avoid his constant calls. Thankfully, her family supported her during this difficult time. Meanwhile, Jed's parents had separated and moved in with new partners. By the fall of 2006, Jennifer Paulson had saved enough money for a down payment on a house and decided to buy one. She found a suitable place a few miles away from her family and was excited to be independent. She also hoped that the move would stop Jed's calls. To her surprise, just a few days after moving into her new home, she answered the phone and heard his familiar, annoying voice. She hadn't even finished unpacking when the calls started again. For days, she ignored him, hoping that this would stop Jed's obsession. However, her relief did not last long. After a while, he continued to call her persistently. This situation reminded Jennifer of her past experiences, and surprisingly, Jed stopped stalking her for about a year. During this time, Jennifer was able to relax and thought that Jed might have found someone else. However, she was shocked when he called her back, acting as if nothing had changed, as if they had just met yesterday. From that point on, Jed continued to contact her regularly, calling about 10 times a day or even more. This pattern of behavior continued for several months before stopping for a long period. This pattern of harassment occurred several times over the years, following a similar trajectory each time. In 2008, Jed started calling her again, and this time it was even more disturbing because he had become more aggressive. Jennifer had no idea how far his obsession had gone until he showed up at her workplace. He casually walked past her office and entered without hesitation. This was the most terrifying experience for Jennifer. She realized that she had never told him where she worked, which meant he had been stalking her. Jed coming to her school and walking among the children terrified her. When she told her father, Ken Paulson, what was happening, he was fed up with Jed's constant harassment. Ken later called Jed and asked him to stay away from his daughter, warning him that there would be consequences if he didn't. Instead of staying away, Jed sent Jennifer a gift at work, a bouquet of flowers and a teddy bear. He later visited her in person again. During this meeting, Jennifer confronted him and asked him to stop coming to the school, warning that she would report him to the police if he continued to stalk her. She was genuinely worried about his obsessive behavior. Jennifer then informed the principal and school staff about the situation because she was concerned for the safety of the students. Everyone was alerted and prepared to call the police if he showed up at the school again. Unfortunately, Jed did not stop. The police were called to the school, and the principal was extremely concerned about the situation. He even contacted Jed's commanding officer in the National Guard, who revealed that Jed had a troubled military background. The commanding officer stated that Jed had served for nearly 2 years, but he had been behaving inappropriately from the beginning. During that time, he had gotten into several fights, spat on his teammates, and attacked his superiors. He was eventually deployed to Kuwait, where he finished his service without any commendation. The main reason for his discharge was a serious mental health issue. Jennifer became extremely concerned for her safety due to Jed's disturbing behavior. She then decided to file for a restraining order. In the application, she detailed Jed's inappropriate behavior, including repeated phone calls and unusual visits to her workplace. Jennifer Paulson was granted a restraining order, which legally prohibited Jed from coming within 300 meters of her, either at home or at work. While the order provided some peace of mind, Jennifer knew that it would not fully protect her if the harassment continued. She hoped that the police would respond more forcefully, which eased her concerns somewhat. Although she was frightened, she was prepared to take legal action against Jed if necessary. Jed was informed of the restraining order and the serious consequences he would face if he violated it. By this time, Jennifer was emotionally exhausted and showing signs of stress, but with the restraining order in place, she felt more secure in her life. Jennifer was shocked to see Jed's car honking at her in her rearview mirror. She quickly called 911 and explained that there was a restraining order against him and that she felt threatened. Eventually, the police advised her to drive calmly to the station. When she arrived, the police and their cars were waiting for Jed, who was arrested and taken in for immediate questioning. However, he denied the charges and refused to admit to any allegations related to stalking. While awaiting a court decision, the judge ordered Jed to be held in jail but set bail at $10,000. Normally, bail for such charges is around $2,000, but Jed's unpredictable and dangerous behavior prompted the judge to increase it significantly. Unfortunately, this precaution did not keep Jed in jail, as he was able to post bail. For days after his arrest, Jennifer and her family learned that he had been released. Everyone was in a panic. Jennifer chose not to return home, where she would be alone, and she did not go to work until the situation was resolved. She decided to stay with her family for support during this uncertain time. Jennifer decided to visit her mother. When she arrived, her mother greeted her in tears, expressing her fear that Jed would prevent her from entering the house. Jennifer was also very emotional but immediately expressed her desire to pray for Jed in this situation. She remained optimistic and kind, following her family's advice and staying with relatives. Her brothers planned to protect her at home by taking turns watching over her. However, Jennifer did not want to be confined to the house. She planned to continue working and could not abandon her students. On Friday at 7:30 a.m., Jennifer went to work, preparing to teach her first class of the day. About 400 students, from grades 1 through 5, along with teachers and staff, were at the school, unaware that they were in grave danger. Since 5:30 a.m., Jed had been nearby, parked in a hidden spot while he monitored the roads leading to the school, waiting for the right moment to approach his target. Jennifer arrived safely at work, parked in her usual spot, and walked toward the school. Everything seemed normal. Meanwhile, Jed got out of his car. As he approached her, he suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back. She screamed and collapsed on the asphalt, and he shot her 7 more times. A man who lived across the street witnessed the horrific scene through his window. He heard her scream but couldn't get there in time to help her. Jed then pointed his gun at a passerby and fired, but the man miraculously dodged the bullet. News outlets reported on the shooting at the school where Jennifer worked, urging locals to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary, as the shooter had fled. At the time, no details were available about the victims. Jennifer's father received a call, and her parents quickly drove to the school. They were horrified to learn that Jed had finally achieved his goal and were even more devastated to learn of Jennifer's death. The attack caused chaos, allowing the perpetrator to flee by car. Fortunately, several witnesses saw his face and got a good look at the car he used to escape. He was quickly identified as Jed Waits, the person against whom Jennifer had a restraining order. Only 20 minutes had passed when one of the patrol officers stopped Jed's car about 10 kilometers from the school where he had just killed Jennifer Paulson. The officers were cautious during the arrest, but the situation quickly escalated. Jed refused to surrender. He pulled out a gun and opened fire on the officers. Fortunately, the officers were prepared and returned fire immediately. Thankfully, no officers were injured. Jed was found to be carrying multiple weapons, possibly because he had anticipated a confrontation with the police. The patrol officers shot him multiple times, but the injuries were not fatal. Tragically, 30-year-old Jed Waits took his own life. When his family was informed of the incident, they were shocked. They had no idea that Jed had been involved in such activities for years. They could not believe that a once kind person had become a stalker and a murderer. Jed's family was profoundly affected by the school shooting. His parents were devastated, regretting that they had not been aware of Jed's problems and had not sought professional help sooner. For days after the tragedy, more than 1,500 mourners attended Jennifer Paulson's funeral at the city's cathedral, including friends, family, and classmates. She was well loved. Many of Jennifer's students were deeply saddened by the loss, as her family viewed her as a beacon of hope for their future. In memory of Jennifer Paulson, a garden was created on the school grounds, which remains to this day. About 50 students, mostly from her class, along with their families, contributed to the creation of the garden, each processing their loss in their own way. Jennifer's family struggled to come to terms with her tragic death. Her father, Ken Paulson, wanted to honor her memory by helping others. He spent years creating legislation to better protect victims of stalking, which he called the Jennifer Paulson Law. His main goal was to speed up the government's response to these cases to prevent similar incidents from happening again. The law also classifies online stalking as in-person stalking. Additionally, Ken advocated for public disclosure of information about individuals with a history of stalking, allowing people to check their acquaintances against available databases. If Jennifer had access to this information, she might have learned about his past troubles. In November 2008, after a court ordered Jed not to contact her, he attacked another girl. Although she narrowly escaped death and was seriously injured, the police did not intervene to stop Jed. As a result, he continued to stalk Jennifer. In the United States, victims of stalking are often required to provide evidence of stalking and harassment. In many cases, authorities simply issue warnings. When the initiative was finally enacted into law, Ken felt satisfied, believing it would save countless victims from the tragic consequences of stalking. Although he knew it would not bring back the life of his beloved daughter, Jennifer, who had died at the age of 30, he believed his efforts had been worthwhile. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Claudia Ornisi. On the morning of July 21, 2011, Stefan contacted the police in Cremona, Italy. Stefan, a resident of the city, had a daily routine of visiting his daughter, Claudia, and his 2-year-old granddaughter, Livia, for coffee. He would spend time with them, chatting, discussing news, playing with Livia, and then continuing with his day. However, on this particular morning, Stefan was deeply alarmed when he couldn't follow his usual routine. Stefan called Claudia several times before going to her house, but she did not answer, which made him very worried. Soon after, he went to her house on Via de Galli, rang the doorbell and knocked on the door, but still no one answered. Using a spare key that Claudia had entrusted to him for emergencies, he entered the house. As soon as he stepped inside, he noticed a strange, overwhelming smell that resembled a gas leak. Holding his breath, he began checking the rooms, fearing the worst. When he entered Claudia's bedroom, he discovered her lying motionless on the bed. He tried to wake her by shaking her, but she didn't respond. In a nearby crib was his niece, Livia, also motionless and cold, like Claudia. In a state of panic, Stefan rushed to the neighbors for help. An emergency rescue team of doctors and police arrived at 8:30 a.m., but both Claudia and Livia were dead. Stefan was devastated, especially by the sight of his little granddaughter motionless, wrapped in her blanket in the crib. From the beginning, investigators suspected that Claudia had taken her own life and that of her daughter. However, some inconsistencies have emerged. First, the strong smell of gas was concerning. An expert inspected the apartment and discovered 4 small propane gas cylinders, the kind typically used for camping stoves. One was positioned right next to Claudia's head at the bed, while the other 3 were placed in the corners of the room. It appeared as though she had intentionally filled the room with gas to end her life painlessly. The question, however, is whether 4 small cylinders could release enough gas to reach lethal concentrations in an uninsulated room to kill both Claudia and Livia. The apartment showed signs of ordinary disarray, consistent with a home shared with a young child. On the kitchen table, detectives found 10 nearly empty packages of Xanax, each originally containing 10 pills. Only 5 pills remained across all the packages. What caught their attention was how methodically the empty blister packs were arranged. They were stacked neatly in a row, almost as if placed that way intentionally to draw notice. This meticulous organization seemed unusual for someone in a state of despair and further heightened investigators' suspicions. Any theories needed verification. What investigators uncovered revealed a disturbing scenario. Initially, they considered the possibility that Claudia had attempted to end her life. If she had ingested 95 Xanax tablets, an overdose could have been the cause of death. However, toxicology tests showed that the drug levels in her blood were too low for such an amount. While small traces of the drug were present, they were far from enough to indicate she had taken 95 tablets. The results suggested she had been sedated and lost consciousness. What is suspicious is that Livia's blood test showed the same result as well. Judging from the bedroom scene, it appeared Claudia placed the gas cylinders, sealed their nozzles with duct tape, and began filling the room with gas. She left her daughter in the crib and then lay down next to her. This appeared to suggest a planned suicide murder, but inconsistencies in the story began to surface. For one, Claudia's relatives were firmly against the idea of voluntary suicide. The woman had no known reason to take her own life. She had never suffered from mental illness, harmful addictions, or depression. Moreover, Claudia adored her daughter so much that even if she had wanted to take her own life, she would never allow her beloved child to die. This confidence undermined the detective's suicide theory. Given the circumstances of the victim's life at the time of her death, Claudia Arn was a 40-year-old single mother. She grew up in a warm, loving family environment surrounded by her parents and sisters. She was described as a calm, kind, and pleasant woman, full of life. Motherhood had been a dream come true for her, a way to fully embrace and express her femininity. Claudia had always cherished the idea of having a family and children. Everyone who knew her described her as a devoted mother and role model. It was unimaginable for those close to her that she would harm her child under any circumstances. Though Claudia had experienced challenges in her personal life, they were not significant enough to suggest she would take such a drastic step. No matter how hard the detectives tried to find solid evidence proving this was a voluntary suicide, doubts kept arising. Claudia simply did not have a clear motive to take her life, let alone harm her child. The longer the police analyzed the crime scene, the more discrepancies they uncovered with the original suicide theory. For example, detectives could not find garbage bags in the apartment, where the cardboard packaging for the Xanax blister packs should logically have been discarded. This absence seemed peculiar. If Claudia had decided to commit suicide, taking out the trash would hardly have been a priority. This observation only deepened the mystery further. The detectives questioned whether someone preparing to take 95 pills would also think about taking the time to throw out the trash. Additionally, they noticed that the control levers on the electric meter were lowered and its lid was left open. This also seemed inappropriate for Claudia's situation. However, it was speculated that she might have been afraid an explosion could occur if gas had been filled. Suspicions were further fueled and the autopsy results came in. According to the forensic expert, Claudia and her daughter died from gas poisoning after losing consciousness from the drugs. However, fire experts denied this possibility, given the level of propane saturation in the room. 4 gas cylinders were clearly not enough to kill 2 people. This added weight to the version involving a third party. Investigators began to suspect that Claudia could not have voluntarily left this life. It was alleged that gas poisoning occurred when bags filled with gas were placed on the heads of Claudia and her daughter. Evidence of this came from the characteristic adhesive tape traces found during a thorough examination of the bodies. In this case, only 1 cylinder per person would have been needed, but it was deemed impossible for Claudia to do this by herself. The more the detectives analyzed the evidence, the more obvious it became that this was murder. The suicide theory was quickly abandoned. When detectives inspected the gas cylinders, suspicions only grew stronger, as no fingerprints were found on their surface. The idea that Claudia could have carefully wiped every canister clean before placing it on the floor seemed absurd. While the use of gloves could justify this, no such gloves were found anywhere. Although they might have been discarded, there was no evidence to support this. Additionally, there were no fingerprints on the Xanax blisters either. This raises further concern, as handling and removing 95 pills would inevitably leave a trace. It became increasingly clear that detectives were looking for a killer, or potentially multiple killers, who were involved in this crime. Investigators shifted their attention to the gas cylinders and Xanax, focusing on tracing their origin using the serial numbers on the packaging. The process was complex and laborious, as it involved not only the city of Crema but also the entire Lombardia region. Through a thorough investigation, they traced it to the town of Cariati, which has a shopping mall. There, they found the gas canister and Xanax that matched the shipments found at the crime scene. Records showed that the pills were purchased there on July 16, 2011, just 4 days before the tragic incident. However, the buyer paid in cash and used a non-personalized discount card, making it difficult to identify them. Nonetheless, investigators persisted and uncovered that the individual had used the card on July 19 to buy food and beverages in a nearby city. Fortunately, a store clerk remembered the customer, a grumpy man, estimated to be 45 to 50 years old, of average height and elegantly dressed. He spoke eloquently but did not provide his name. The July 19 purchases raised further suspicion, as the man bought adhesive tape, potentially used to secure the buttons on the gas cylinders, causing them to release gas automatically. At this stage, the man's identity was still unknown. Authorities were working to determine who might have had a motive to harm Claudia and her daughter. The evidence suggested someone close to Claudia, as there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that she had willingly allowed the person into her home. This led investigators to focus on people she knew well. Ultimately, they concluded that the prime suspect was her ex-partner, Maurizio Iori, a well-known ophthalmologist in Crema and the biological father of her daughter, Livia. Maurizio was a man of good reputation, with a successful career and a respected family background. Claudia had a brief but intense relationship with him, which started in 2008 when she visited him as a patient. Mauricio's polite, kind, and professional demeanor immediately appealed to Claudia, who was lonely at the time. She quickly developed feelings for him. Being a prominent and accomplished man, he soon invited her on a date, and his refined manners and attentiveness captured her heart. However, their journey toward happiness faced a significant obstacle. Claudia was single and free, while Maurizio was married with 2 children. From the beginning, this bothered Claudia, but Maurizio reassured her that his marriage was troubled and he was planning to get divorced soon. As their relationship deepened, they began meeting in secret, often traveling to other cities to avoid raising suspicion from Mauricio's wife. He explained that secrecy was necessary because if the affair were discovered, it could complicate the divorce process and division of assets. Claudia gradually felt trapped in the role of a mistress and started to question her place in the relationship. Conflicts occasionally surfaced, but Maurizio always managed to calm her down, urging her to wait until the situation was resolved. Her hopes for a better outcome were shattered in May 2008, when Claudia discovered she was pregnant. For Maurizio, the news was unwelcome and infuriating, as he made it clear he did not want children outside of his marriage. This heightened the tension between them, leading to their separation. Claudia pinned her hopes on the child, believing motherhood would bring her happiness and purpose, but instead, the pregnancy further deepened her struggles. After their breakup, Claudia began to see Maurizio differently. She realized he was never truly committed to building a family with her but was only interested in having fun on the side. His politeness and kindness disappeared entirely. He pressured her to have an abortion, but she was shocked and devastated, so she refused and was determined to keep the pregnancy under all circumstances. For 3 months, Maurizio persisted in urging her to end the pregnancy, but Claudia held her ground. Eventually, he met with her again and made his intentions clear. His primary concern was protecting his reputation. He insisted that no one should ever find out about Claudia or their child. He demanded that she keep her distance and avoid contacting him. Claudia, however, refused to comply. Feeling deceived and betrayed, she was determined that her daughter would not grow up in secrecy or obscurity. Resolute in safeguarding her and her child's future, Claudia sought legal help to force Maurizio to recognize his paternity. As Claudia's pregnancy advanced, Maurizio finalized his divorce. To her dismay, she discovered he had started a relationship with another woman before breaking up with her. Even more shocking, this new girlfriend was also expecting a child. This confirmed Claudia's belief that Maurizio had been dishonest and deceitful toward her. In the meantime, he concentrated on safeguarding his own interests. He was preparing to marry his new partner, a wealthy woman who aligned with his social status. He feared that if information about his relationship with Claudia or the fact that he had a child out of wedlock were revealed, his career and reputation would be severely affected. He admitted this fear to Claudia frankly. On February 3, 2009, Claudia gave birth to her daughter, Livia. Over time, Maurizio softened slightly and agreed to provide limited support for Claudia and the baby, who lived with Claudia's parents. He pledged to pay $400 per month for Livia's expenses and purchased an apartment for them, covering its mortgage. However, he restricted himself to visiting his daughter only once a week. This arrangement strained their already tense relationship. Despite everything, Claudia remained hopeful, believing that Maurizio might eventually develop genuine love and affection for Livia, grow into his role as a caring father. The last scheduled meeting between Maurizio and Livia was set for July 20, 2011. Claudia's mother told the police that Claudia had been feeling unwell, and Maurizio planned to visit to support her. He suggested they have dinner featuring sushi, a surprisingly out-of-character choice for him. Claudia's mother immediately found his behavior strange. Maurizio disliked fish and had never stayed with them for more than an hour, let alone brought food or made thoughtful gestures. Additionally, he brought a package of sauce that police would later confirm he had purchased on July 19, 2011, a detail that would become critical in the subsequent investigation. Claudia's mother grew convinced that Maurizio was connected to what happened afterward. Her greatest distress came from Claudia's genuine belief that Maurizio was finally trying to put effort into their relationship. Claudia had been so optimistic about the dinner, even borrowing her mother's best items for the occasion. Tragically, those items were later found the next morning on the lifeless bodies of Claudia and her child. The police quickly launched an investigation and identified Maurizio as the main suspect, bringing him in for questioning. While denying any involvement, he voluntarily went to the station and stated that he had not been at Claudia's apartment that evening. He provided an alibi, claiming that on July 20th, he left his office at 6:30 p.m., got takeaway food, ate it at home, and then went to the cinema at 9 p.m. He said he paid for his movie ticket in cash and returned home to sleep after watching the film. Mauricio's alibi fell apart quickly. He claimed he didn't keep his cinema ticket, but police reviewed security footage and confirmed he wasn't among the 38 people leaving the session. His mobile phone data added to the inconsistencies, as it showed his phone had stayed near a beach house several kilometers away during the entire evening, contradicting his claim of being at the cinema. It became clear that Maurizio had lied about his whereabouts. When police questioned Mauricio's wife, she revealed that she had tried to contact him multiple times without success. Starting at 7:30 p.m. and continuing until 11 p.m., she repeatedly called him, but he never answered. She also tried reaching his office and friends, but no one knew where he was. Eventually, she contacted a neighbor near their beach house, who confirmed seeing Mauricio's car parked outside. Suspecting he was inside, the neighbor called him but received no response. Upon entering the unlocked house, it was empty, but Mauricio's phone had been left behind for the entire evening. As investigators searched the house, they discovered a note addressed to Maurizio, written by Claudia. The note revealed a shocking secret about Mauricio's illegitimate child. The neighbor, who noticed the note, alerted the police for further investigation. Later, Maurizio returned to the beach house around 2 a.m. and called both his wife and the police to assure them he was safe. However, his explanations only deepened suspicions. Police proceeded with the investigation, increasingly convinced that Mauricio's lies and attempts to hide the truth were unraveling. Based on the CCTV footage, he did not return to the beach house, which led investigators to believe that he was at Claudia's house during that time, confronting his daughter and his estranged lover. His alibi was shattered by his wife's nervousness, which further complicated matters. Maurizio, a well-known ophthalmologist, resorted to lying, raising even more suspicion. Evidence against him mounted rapidly. It was revealed that he had purchased multiple packages of Xanax at a shopping center in another city, paying in cash, likely to avoid detection. Store employees later identified him through receipts linking to online orders found on his computer, as well as from search history showing he had researched how to kill someone with propane or Xanax. He seemed particularly interested in the case of a Moroccan prisoner who died due to a propane gas tank. When questioned about these suspicious purchases, including gas cylinders, Maurizio claimed that Claudia had spoken about using them to heat baby food for Livia. However, the Supreme Court found this explanation unconvincing. Overwhelmed by the mounting evidence, he eventually confessed that he had not gone to the cinema that evening as he initially claimed. Instead, he admitted to visiting Claudia and stated that when he left, she and Livia were alive and well. He claimed to have no knowledge of what happened afterward. Maurizio justified his lies as an attempt to conceal his affair from his wife and mislead investigators. Nonetheless, his extramarital relationship, along with his deep resentment toward his daughter Livia, became widely known. During a police search of the house, officers discovered a dramatic letter detailing these incidents and emotions. Claudia described Maurizio as a ruthless and deceitful man who betrayed her. It was after the birth of her child that she felt the full weight of despair. Her frustration stemmed from Mauricio's cold and even cruel behavior toward the baby girl immediately after her birth. It seemed as though he viewed the child as inferior. At the same time, Claudia discovers that Maurizio has an illegitimate child and plans to marry the child's mother soon. The arrival of the baby left Claudia confused and hurt, unable to understand why Maurizio treated her and their child so poorly. It became apparent that he did not consider her his equal, had no intention of marrying her, and had no plans to remain a father to their child, Livia. Meanwhile, Mauricio's mother, Paola, played a dominant role in his life. It was clear that Maurizio was completely under her control. He feared her disapproval and, as an adult, would hide details about his personal life, relationships to avoid her judgment. Even though Paola was unaware of his affair and its consequences, he seemed convinced that Claudia would never gain his mother's acceptance under any circumstances. As a result, he kept Claudia a secret, but she began pressuring him nonetheless. His intentions and motivations were unclear, particularly since he consistently denied any wrongdoing. Most of the evidence in the case was circumstantial, and authorities were unable to locate the murder weapon. Investigators focused on finding a bag of trash from Claudia's apartment, believing it contained critical evidence such as gloves and pill packaging. Maurizio likely disposed of the bag. In her letter, Claudia hinted at being blackmailed, which may have cornered her. Meanwhile, Livia was mostly rejected by Maurizio and encountered hostility even before her birth. The tipping point for Mauricio's decision to kill Claudia and Livia appears to have been her demand that he take full responsibility for Livia, treat her as an equal member of his family, and stop belittling her. Maurizio saw this as a serious threat to his carefully constructed life, his reputation, financial stability, and, above all, his mother's approval. Financial issues played a significant role as well. Claudia did not work, leaving all her expenses to be covered by Maurizio. Evidence revealed that, 3 months before the murder, Maurizio had been researching ways to recover mortgage payments for the apartment he had bought for Claudia. This indicates that he meticulously planned the crime to minimize financial losses stemming from the affair. On the night of October 11, 2011, Claudia and Livia were waiting for Maurizio to visit, as planned. He arrived with sushi, soy sauce, and drinks, all of which had been laced with a sedative. Claudia dressed up and prepared her daughter for the evening, hoping to charm Maurizio and mend their relationship. However, he had come with the intention of committing a double murder. After dinner, Claudia and Livia lost consciousness from the sedatives. Maurizio carries them into the bedroom and stages the scene to make it look like Claudia has harmed her and her daughter. He placed gas-filled bags over their heads, sealing them with tape. Once they were dead, he cleaned the scene thoroughly to remove any evidence, disposed of incriminating items, and left. Around 3 a.m., he drove to his beach house. On October 14, 2011, Maurizio Iori was arrested and charged with the premeditated murders of Claudia and Livia. The trial shocked the public, as it was hard to believe that a respected doctor could kill his mistress and their child. Despite the defense's arguments and requests for a reduced sentence, the court found the crime to be carefully planned. In January 2013, Maurizio Iori was sentenced to life in prison. His lawyers appealed, but the Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2015. He was also ordered to pay $600,000 in compensation to Claudia's family. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Maurizio maintained his innocence and continued to speak to journalists, describing the trial as unfair and claiming he had been framed by the authorities. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jasmine Pace. Jasmine Pace, a 22-year-old college student, planned to spend Thanksgiving 2022 with her family. However, her plans suddenly changed, leaving her mother surprised. At the last moment, she sent a message canceling the family gathering. Shortly afterward, a new post appeared on Jasmine's Facebook page that read, "Enjoy Thanksgiving with my baby," accompanied by a photo that raised concerns. Initially confused, her family's concern quickly escalated into panic when they realized something was wrong. Jasmine was missing, and someone seemed to be impersonating her online. On the night of November 22, 2022, Jasmine drove a white Chevy Equinox away from her home in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at approximately 11:30 p.m. Later, her mother, Katrina Bean, received a text from Jasmine's phone stating that she would spend the rest of the week at her friend Emma's house. Since Jasmine was grieving the recent loss of her grandmother to cancer, her decision to skip the family gathering didn't immediately alarm her loved ones. She often withdrew for short periods to cope with her emotions. But everything took a troubling turn when Jasmine made a Facebook post. The post featured Jasmine in an uncharacteristically revealing outfit, which surprised her mother. What alarmed her father, Travis Pace, was even more troubling. Jasmine's extensive tattoos were missing from the photo. Each tattoo represented a timeline in her life, added months apart, creating a distinctive pattern, especially on her right arm. The glaring absence of these tattoos confirmed the post was fake, and Jasmine's family realized the situation was far worse than they had imagined. Katrina reached out to Jasmine's friend Emma and confirmed what she had suspected. Jasmine had been missing from her family for a week, contradicting the claims in a recent message. Several other friends and family members had also received suspicious messages supposedly from Jasmine, all of which raised concerns. The family immediately began searching for her. Jasmine's SUV, equipped with a GPS feature from the My Chevrolet app, allowed her mother to track its location. The car was found parked outside a building on Mountain Creek Road in Chattanooga. By the time it was discovered, it was 8:30 p.m. on November 26, 4 days after Jasmine was last seen leaving her mother's house late on the evening of the 22nd. The area where the car was located was unfamiliar to the family, and as far as they knew, Jasmine didn't know anyone there. When they approached the car, they noticed that the driver's seat was pushed far back, suggesting that someone much taller than the petite Jasmine had been driving. The family contacted the police, who arrived on the scene and filed a report describing the situation. Katrina also reached out to the family's cell phone provider. Since Jasmine was part of their family plan, her mother, Katrina, had access to her phone records. The records revealed that there had been no calls from Jasmine's phone for several days. In the presence of the police, Katrina began calling the numbers listed in the call log. One number stood out, a call with someone Jasmine had spoken to for over an hour on the night of the 22nd. When Katrina dialed that number, it connected to a young man named Jason, whom Jasmine had recently met on a dating app. Jason, a computer science student at a university in Chattanooga, had been casually dating Jasmine for a few months. Their relationship was not serious, so Jasmine never introduced him to her parents, Katrina and Travis, who didn't know him. When Jasmine was reported missing, Jason claimed he hadn't heard from her in several days and that their last conversation had been brief. However, Katrina found his behavior suspicious and felt he might be lying. His apparent lack of concern further alarmed her. Despite Katrina urging the police to dig deeper, they refused, arguing that Jasmine was an adult and there was no clear evidence of foul play. Determined to find their daughter, Katrina and Travis began knocking on doors throughout the apartment complex on Mountain Creek Road. Unfortunately, no neighbors had seen Jasmine. They sought help from the apartment guard, who provided security camera footage. The video showed a white Chevrolet entering the parking lot. By cross-referencing this footage with timestamps from the My Chevrolet app, they pinpointed the general time frame but couldn't identify the driver. Katrina then noticed an unread text message from Jasmine, sent on November 23rd. The message included a location and timestamp, showing Jasmine's device had been at a specific place at 2:18 a.m. This was highly unusual, as Jasmine had never sent such cryptic messages, especially during the night. Acting quickly, Katrina and Travis went straight to the address mentioned in the message. Jasmine's parents, Katrina and Travis, knocked on every door in the building, paying particular attention to room 210. Neighbors mentioned hearing a loud noise from that unit around 2:15 a.m. on November 23rd. Upon investigation, Katrina and Travis quickly discovered that the tenant of the apartment was Jason. The unit was quite small, consisting of a kitchenette near the sofa, a hallway leading to the bedroom, and a single bathroom. From the front door, they could see a small duffel bag filled with cleaning supplies sitting on the kitchen table. While searching, Travis found Jasmine's driver's license and credit cards in a drawer. They called the police again, but after speaking with Katrina and the neighbors, the officers left, citing a lack of immediate evidence of foul play. Frustrated by the lack of action, Katrina went back to the apartment several times over the next few hours. She collected items like laptops, electronics, cell phones, a camera, and an iPad, anything that might offer clues to her daughter's whereabouts. She and Travis also searched the trash cans outside the building. Nearly at midnight, the police finally returned to room 210 with a search warrant and officially began their investigation. During the inspection, they observed suspicious stains resembling blood in multiple areas, on the wooden floor in the living room, the linoleum in the bathroom, and the carpet in the bedroom. They also discovered blood stains on the bathroom doors and walls. The substantial amount of cleaning supplies found in the apartment further heightened suspicions. At the scene, police seized a pair of white sneakers and blue pants for further investigation. In the living room, broken glass fragments hinted at a possible violent altercation. In the bedroom, the furniture appeared to have been moved, suggesting attempts to conceal signs of a struggle. This discovery led investigators to focus more intently on piecing together the unsettling clues surrounding Jasmine's disappearance. In some parts of the apartment, it was evident that furniture had been rearranged to hide evidence. A kitchen knife was found on the bed, and stains that could potentially be blood were present in nearly every room. A forensic team was brought in to apply a specialized solution designed to detect traces of blood. The investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Detectives obtained CCTV footage from the apartment building and nearby areas to construct a timeline of Jason Chen's movements, hoping it would lead to locating Jasmine Pace. Investigators confirmed that Jasmine arrived at 110 Tremont before midnight on November 22. Her Chevrolet was seen entering the building's parking lot and later leaving, with investigators tracking the vehicle to the apartment complex where Jason lived. The day after her arrival, Jasmine was recorded leaving the building, wearing a hoodie. A surveillance camera at the apartment's entrance captured Jason leaving multiple times, including at 7:30 p.m. Just 3 minutes later, someone in a light-colored sweatshirt was seen driving Jasmine's SUV to the Signal View condo, where the vehicle was abandoned. On November 23, 2022, Jason took several suspicious trips. In the morning, He went to Walmart and purchased hydrogen peroxide, cleaning supplies, and a pair of white sneakers, which were clearly visible on the store's surveillance footage. These sneakers were later found discarded in a trash can near the apartment complex. That evening, Jason visited Ukraine to buy a pack of paper towels. Between the Walmart trip and disposing of some clothes, investigators believe Jason was attempting to conceal evidence. His movements were monitored through various surveillance videos across Chattanooga, where his distinctive white sweatshirt made him easily identifiable even in blurry footage. Around 6 p.m. on the 23rd, a man in a white sweatshirt was filmed struggling to move a large suitcase from the apartment entrance to the parking lot. Shortly afterward, Jason's black Toyota Camry was seen driving away. On November 29th, a week after Jasmine's disappearance, Jason was found at his parents' home. The arresting officers in Nolanville observed cuts on Jason's arms and legs, suggesting a violent encounter. A search warrant was issued for the home, resulting in the seizure of a black backpack and handwritten notes from the room Jason had been staying in. The notes appeared to show him trying to construct his version of the incident. Detectives discovered Jason had last seen Jasmine on November 19th, according to notes he made. He claimed they had spoken and mentioned that Jasmine struggled with mental health issues. Jason seemingly prepared for his eventual questioning by portraying Jasmine as homeless. During a search of Jason's backpack, detectives found his phone and a SIM card removed from Jasmine's phone. Upon examining Jason's phone, investigators recovered a photo of Jasmine standing in his bathroom on the night she disappeared. They also found screenshots of text messages from Jasmine, though the content of the messages was missing. The morning following Jasmine's apparent death, Jason sent her a photo captioned, "Slept like a baby," followed by a text later that day saying, "We'll meet again tonight." Metadata revealed the photo had been taken 2 years earlier. Jasmine's phone records showed she visited Walmart with Jason on the morning she disappeared, but surveillance footage only captured Jason shopping alone. Investigators traced Jason's movements, revealing that he loaded a large suitcase into his Toyota Camry and drove to Suck Creek Road near the riverbank. On December 1st, Thursday, investigators found a suitcase along the riverbank. It belonged to Jason and contained Jasmine's body. She was wrapped in 3 garbage bags and restrained with handcuffs. Her right hand was cuffed to her right ankle, while her left ankle was cuffed to her right elbow. The handcuffs were basic models, not police issue, with one chain broken. An autopsy confirmed Jasmine had been fatally attacked, with the bullet concentrated in a single area of her body. In December 2022, Jason Chen's bail was set at $5 million, sparking outrage due to the disturbing details of Jasmine's murder. Many believed he shouldn't have been offered bail at all. Evidence revealed that Jason had accessed Jasmine's phone and SIM card to manage her bank account and post fake messages after her death. During his opening statement on the first day of court proceedings, lawyer Josh Weiss did not claim his client's innocence. He acknowledged that Jason killed Jasmine but argued that it was unintentional. The prosecution did not pursue the death penalty. If convicted of first-degree murder, Jason faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. His best chance for a lighter sentence would be to plead to a lesser charge, such as manslaughter. To do this, the defense aimed to convince the jury that Jason killed Jasmine in a moment of passion, having been provoked into an extreme emotional reaction that resulted in her death. The defense's argument suggested that they had been drinking wine late at night at Jason's home, and that Jasmine had gone to the kitchen to get water. While there, she allegedly heard constant notifications from a dating app on Jason's phone. This led to an argument between the two, during which Jasmine reportedly attacked Jason with a broken wine glass. Jason, who had earlier taken a kitchen knife to his bedroom to open a bottle of wine, used the knife during the struggle. The defense explained the stains on Jasmine's body as part of an incident that occurred after the attack. They claimed Jason panicked after the attack and handcuffed Jasmine to fit her into a suitcase. Video recordings from Jason and Jasmine's phones, along with testimony from neighbors, provided a timeline of the murder and Jason's attempts to cover it up. Neighbor Courtney Brewer testified to hearing an argument after 2 a.m. The reconstruction of the murder relied heavily on the physical evidence found at the crime scene, but this is where the case became complicated. Police applied a chemical to various items at the crime scene, including a broken knife. Katrina inspected and searched the crime scene. The defense later called its expert to highlight significant changes observed between the initial police response and the scene's documentation. Furniture had been moved, and questions arose about whether certain items were relevant evidence. Travis testified that, when he initially entered the room with Katrina to find their daughter, he didn't see a knife on the bed. The medical examiner determined the attack was deliberate and found no suspicious evidence contradicting this conclusion. Based on the location of the wounds, Jasmine was likely in a fetal position during the assault. The handcuffs she wore were most likely applied while she was still alive. Additionally, the medical examiner found no alcohol in her system, which contradicted Jason's claim that they had been drinking wine. Jason's argument that Jasmine provoked him by becoming angry over dating app notifications was proven false. A state expert reviewed the app's data and confirmed no notifications were received. Jason chose not to testify in his defense. Evidence was presented quickly. Jason's lawyer withdrew support for his initial story, instead highlighting the absence of handcuff marks on Jasmine's wrists, which would have been visible if she had been alive when restrained. The presence of handcuffs suggested that the attack was premeditated. The number of wounds indicated that Jason had sufficient time to think through and carry out the assault. During closing arguments, prosecutor Cody Vamp outlined the sequence of events, including Courtney Brewer hearing someone running to the apartment door at 2 a.m. The jury began deliberating after the final arguments and delivered a verdict shortly afterward. One juror confirmed that the repeated visits by Jasmine Pace's family to the crime scene did not influence their decision. At the sentencing phase, jurors had to decide whether Jason Chen should ever be eligible for parole. Jason's attorney appealed to the jury, asking them to grant his client a chance for redemption. However, the jury deliberated for less than an hour and ultimately convicted Jason Chen of first-degree murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Following the conviction, Jasmine Pace's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jason Chen's parents. They accused the parents of harboring Jason, giving him money, and sharing information during the days after the murder while he was the prime suspect and their daughter was still missing. The loss of Jasmine and the ensuing legal battles deeply affected the Pace family. After the sentencing, the trials surrounding Jason Chen, referred to by the family as a monster, were marked by overwhelming grief. Prosecutors condemned his crime as heinous, cruel, and inhumane. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Michelle Kitterman. When a person capable of betrayal appears in a circle of close friends, this clearly cannot lead to anything good, especially if a love triangle is involved. Lacey Hurst Pavek was born in 1974 in Tonasket, Washington State, a tiny town with a population located south of the Canadian border. Her family owned the largest and most popular restaurant in the city, which made them local celebrities. They were quite wealthy, everyone in the city knew and respected them, some were even afraid of them. According to eyewitnesses, Lacey always had trouble making friends. Many children avoided her because she belonged to a privileged background. However, this did not particularly worry Lacey. She had a narrow circle of trusted friends. In high school, Lacey dated boys but only experienced real feelings when she met a young man named Brandon. At least, that was her first love, which eventually developed into marriage. Unfortunately, this relationship did not last long. After some time, Lacey and Brandon decided to get a divorce, with Lacey being the initiator. They then began a fight for sole custody of their children. Lacey's influential family managed to provide her with the best divorce lawyer, and the children remained with her. According to Lacey, the reason for the separation was constant quarrels with her husband, although the specifics were never disclosed. Nevertheless, it was believed that her husband was a decent person who never raised a hand against her. After the divorce, Lacey got a job as a financial director at a car dealership, where she met a man named Danny Pavek. Danny was quite an attractive bachelor, well known in the city and a favorite among women. Many wanted to build a relationship with him, but he, by his own admission, was only interested in wealthy Lacey. Danny warmly accepted her and her children. Their relationship before the wedding lasted almost 8 years, and finally, Lacey had everything she had dreamed of: a family, a new husband, a home, and a career. Despite being very busy, Lacey always found time to relax with her husband, friends, or relatives. Danny was drawn to her cheerful life and willingly participated in various events. Among the regular members of their social circle were friends from high school, including one of Lacey's few friends, Tansy. Tansy was known as a party girl, which made her hesitant to make friendships. She was also involved in distributing illegal substances and loved to throw parties wherever she went. Tansy had a large circle of friends and acquaintances, also from the same town, Michelle Kitterman. She was born on May 12, 1983, alongside her twin sister, Danielle Kitterman. They was born into a loving family and initially lived in Richland, Washington. The sisters shared a very close relationship, and they also had an older sister named Melinda. Despite being born prematurely, the twins grew up healthy in Benton City, Washington, after moving there due to their father's work. Michelle was an energetic, independent girl who wanted to explore the world and build a career. While not particularly interested in family, she was open to having children. Seeking a better life, Michelle moved to Virginia and lived in Maryland for some time. This was during her work in the modeling industry, as her looks were noticed during her senior year in high school. She occasionally received good photography offers. However, everything changed on May 23, 2003, when Michelle, then 20 years old, found herself in a difficult situation. The boy she was seeing abandoned her when he learned she was pregnant. In 2008, the Kitterman family faced their first shock when the twins' father passed away after a long illness. By October of that year, Michelle decided to move back closer to her family. She had always participated in shows, performed in groups, and loved the stage, but what amazed everyone the most was her beauty. Her modeling career was gaining momentum, and many believed she had a bright future ahead, until Michelle got pregnant. Initially, she planned to continue with her modeling career, but now her priorities shifted. She wanted to be a good mother. To stay afloat, Michelle began working part-time in various fields, such as being a waitress or a bartender. It was a tough period, but she eventually secured a job as an administrator at a local private clinic. Michelle was described as a very hard-working, kind mother, remained young, easy-going, and lively. In November 2008, Tansy and Michelle attended a big city party where Michelle caught Danny Pavek's attention. They talked all evening and found it hard to stop. By the end of the night, both realized they were in love with each other. They began to meet secretly despite Danny's marriage to Lacey. He would tell his wife that he was out with friends or working late, but in reality, he was with Michelle. He spent time with Lacey while at home, often stayed late after work, walking until late with friends. He had a wide circle of friends, and Lacey did not suspect that her husband could have an affair, as she trusted him completely. One day, a friend visited Lacey, hoping to catch her at home without Danny. She disclosed Danny's betrayal, which was a real blow for Lacey. However, she composed herself, understanding the small town dynamics and how well known their family was, amidst numerous rumors. Lacey expected that this was just another piece of gossip, but days later, Danny confessed. He revealed that he was torn in a love triangle and couldn't choose between the two women. He decided that revealing his secret relationship to his wife would help him break free from the emotional turmoil. Danny admitted that he had been seeing his mistress for several months. And shortly before these events, Michelle became pregnant, which added to the confusion. He shared every detail, including how he met Michelle at the party. He claimed that Tansy introduced them and was the catalyst for his subsequent betrayals. Obviously, he sought to absolve himself of responsibility for his infidelity. After his confession, Lacey threatened to divorce him if he didn't leave his mistress. However, during this time, Michelle was doing the same. She saw Danny as an excellent candidate for a husband and father for her child. Furthermore, Michelle hoped that this new relationship would help her achieve a stable life, which she felt was necessary for her happiness. Although rumors suggested that Danny did not work and lived off his wife, he found himself in a very difficult situation. Lacey demanded that he make a choice, but for Danny, this was a big problem since he liked both women. He had to decide whether to continue living in a marriage with his wealthy wife and children or to leave for his beautiful young mistress. Several days passed during which he shared his internal conflict with friends, claiming that he had decided to leave his family and was going to tell his wife. Lacey was desperate not to lose her beloved husband and was willing to do whatever it took to keep him. On March 1, 2009, a woman contacted the police station of a neighboring city, reporting that she had found the body of a girl who was covered in blood. When the police arrived, they found the deceased in terrible condition on a deserted road in a remote area of the city. The girl was half naked, lying on her jacket, and covered in blood. Her hair was tangled in the barbed wire of a fence along the road. Initially, the cause of death was unclear. Detectives believed that the girl could have gotten lost, was frozen and disoriented due to hypothermia. She might have fallen onto the barbed wire. The police suspected intoxication or the use of illegal substances, but subsequent toxicological examinations did not confirm these suspicions. Further analysis revealed that she was a victim of murder. The unidentified body showed no signs of life and had extensive injuries. The forensic expert counted 39 stab wounds that were unusually shaped, clearly not inflicted by a simple kitchen knife. The victim received deep stab wounds from a weapon resembling an ice pick. These peculiar wounds were concentrated in the neck and abdomen areas, with a large amount of blood around the body, indicating that the victim had put up significant resistance. Identifying the body proved difficult since documents were not found with her. Witnesses insisted that the girl was not a local resident. The only valuable clue was a tattoo on the deceased's body. The police photographed the tattoo and began checking missing persons reports from nearby cities. One of the first cases that caught the detectives' attention was a report from Michelle Kitterman's mother. When shown a photograph of the tattoo, she immediately recognized her daughter, making it evident that the deceased was Michelle, who was in the early weeks of her pregnancy. Condition of the body indicating a personal motive from the killer, possibly jealousy, revenge, or insult. The nature of the injuries suggested that they were likely inflicted by more than one person. The investigators concluded that the crime had likely been committed by a group. Consequently, the police began to investigate Michelle's immediate social circle to understand who could have perpetrated this brutal attack. In their inquiries, they spoke extensively with Michelle's loved ones. Tracy, in particular, mentioned Danny Pavek when asked about Michelle's complicated relationships. She was aware of the love triangle in which Michelle found herself and knew about her daughter's pregnancy. Michelle had expressed her desire to keep the baby and to pursue a life with Danny, aiming to take him away from Lacey, who he had been seen on the side for several months. Despite the fact that he had the same motive for the murder, wanting to get rid of the annoying mistress and save his marriage with a wealthy wife, this version of events needed to be checked. The investigators first went to the house where he lived with his wife and children. Contrary to expectations, Danny had an alibi during the attack. He was at home with his wife. Lacey was also questioned. She was at home when the police arrived, behaved very calmly, and admitted that she knew about her husband's affair and that his mistress was pregnant. Lacey did not hide her distress over these facts but insisted that they were working on their marriage and trying to save it, that she had nothing to do with Michelle's murder. The detectives didn't notice anything suspicious, so they were forced to leave empty-handed. The police continued their investigation, needing to talk to a dozen more people from the deceased's closest circle of friends. 2 days later, Lacey called the station and admitted that she had a theory about who could be guilty of this bloody massacre. She referred to Tansy. According to Lacey, Michelle had been planning to report Tansy to the police for selling illegal substances for a long time. Lacey believed that Michelle was a police informant, giving Tansy a good reason to get rid of her. However, she could not provide any confirmation of this. This information needed to be checked. Before the police had time to investigate Lacey's claims, another call came into the station. A young man contacted them, saying that he had information for the police but would only share it if he was provided protection. He was seriously afraid for his life because the killers were dangerous people and would inevitably take revenge upon learning what he was going to do. The caller knew that not long ago, a girl had been beaten to death with an ice pick. Since no information about the murder weapon had been published, it was obvious that this was a valuable witness. The informant also referred to Tansy Mathis, mentioning that she sold banned substance and had repeatedly hired people if she faced any problems with her business. This allowed her to collect debts and remove unwanted competitors. The caller knew this well because he had once worked part-time as her personal security guard. However, he assured them that he was not involved in the attack, but he knew who they should investigate closely. According to him, Tansy had hired another individual known in criminal circles as Hollywood, who was supposed to deal with Michelle. The informant indicated that the ice pick had not been randomly chosen, it was provided by a man named David Richards. Of all the names mentioned, the detectives were most interested in Hollywood. After checking the databases, the police managed to locate a man named Brent Phillips, known as Hollywood. The alleged mastermind was arrested first. Brent was found in a rehabilitation center, where he was apparently seeking refuge from police persecution. He denied any wrongdoing, claiming to have had no idea about his actions and expressed that they had no serious motive to deal so cruelly with a pregnant young woman. Nevertheless, it was evident that Tansy was clearly lying because she knew Michelle. It seemed that the police had seasoned criminals in their hands who would not be easy to crack. Yet, contrary to expectations, just 4 days after the arrest, the alleged killer agreed to cooperate with the police. The reason for this, he claimed, was that he did not have enough money after the murder. The suspicions were confirmed. He had indeed participated in the massacre, but he had never been paid for the crime. After violating the terms of his agreement, he decided to cooperate and turn in the mastermind, hoping to receive leniency during sentencing. Brent said that he knew in advance what Tansy intended to do because she might not be able to manage on her own. Therefore, a strong accomplice was necessary. Tansy had convinced several more people in advance, telling them the story that Michelle wanted to cooperate with the police and would hand over the gang. On the evening of Michelle's murder, Tansy, David Richards, and Brent came for their victim, inviting her to go out for a supposedly fun night at a casino. Michelle, who knew these people well, readily agreed, falling into their trap. The group headed towards the gambling establishment, choosing a deserted road outside the city. Instead of going to the casino, however, they drove 50 kilometers away from the city and suddenly pulled over, suggesting that Michelle stop to smoke. She agreed, but after they stopped, they dragged her out into the snow and began to beat her with an ice pick. The first few blows to the stomach were made by Tansy, then she handed the ice pick to Brent because the tool was too heavy for her. Brent himself inflicted many more wounds on the defenseless Michelle. The overall story seemed plausible, but the investigators were still interested in confirming the details. Why was Tansy so angry at her old friend and her unborn child? The first blows of the killer were not made by chance, they were precisely aimed at the stomach, yet Tansy stubbornly remained silent. Analyzing the words of the murderer, the detectives quickly realized that the car in which the company was traveling that evening did not belong to any of them, everyone had other cars. The brand was identified, indicating that the transport for this trip was rented, but they did not know from whom exactly. The detectives began to investigate the car and managed to find a receipt for the rental. The managers showed the recordings from the surveillance cameras, which indicated that Lacey rented the car in her own name. In addition, she worked there, so she was unmistakably recognized. This made her the main suspect as the jealous wife seeking retribution. Rumors reached the investigators that Lacey had repeatedly spoken unflatteringly about Michelle. She stated how she wished her husband's mistress would disappear along with the child. Naturally, she had the most compelling motive for committing the crime, but it was not possible to connect the daughter of an influential family with the bloody massacre, at least until investigators found her at the car dealership. So, Lacey added to list of potential suspects. Curiously, bail amounts of $1 million were set for the other detainees, which no one could pay, while only $250,000 was set for Lacey. Everyone thought this was connected to her powerful family, which especially outraged the victim's family. This decision was a real shock. Michelle's mother and sisters thought that this could be a conspiracy and that they were all in danger. Trials against each of the criminals began, starting with Brent's hearing on charges of first-degree murder of Michelle and first-degree assault on her unborn baby. Phillips was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 26 years in prison. At the trial, Brent admitted that Tansey turned him against Michelle by telling him that Michelle will report him to the police because he is involved in banned substance trafficking. A similar situation occurred with a third accomplice. The lie worked with all of this. Tansey was found guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter due to the fact that the unborn child died. It was believed that she inflicted the deepest blows with an ice pick that injured the baby. In addition, she was charged with first-degree kidnapping and concealment of material evidence. The punishment chosen was life imprisonment without the right to parole. Furthermore, for all the crimes committed, Tansey received additional sentences under other charges, totaling 19 years. Tansey admitted that she had committed the crime at Lacey's request, while her accomplice David Richards, who provided assistance, received 17 years in prison for complicity in the murder. All these hearings went fairly quickly, but Lacey's case stalled from the very beginning. The lawyer insisted that she did not want to kill anyone, but only intended to intimidate the homewrecker. The murder occurred because the criminals could not control the situation. She continued to claim that it was Tansey who initiated the attack because Michelle planned to report her illicit activities to the police. Lacey removed all responsibility from herself, denying any connection to the criminal acts. Lacey's defense immediately went to work and repeatedly delayed the hearings, prolonging the defendant's freedom. This made the situation even more tense because Lacey had rented a car, what rich woman would rent a car for? All this raised serious doubts. Recordings of telephone conversations between the participants in a conspiracy were analyzed, confirming that Lacey and Tansey called each other many times on the night of the crime. This clearly did not happen by coincidence. Additionally, even during her initial communication with the police, Lacey openly expressed her dislike for Michelle and stated that she wanted her mistress to disappear from their lives forever. Interestingly, when the detectives decided to talk to Lacey's husband, Danny, who started this love triangle, it turned out that he was on the run. This went on for about a week, leading to an arrest warrant being issued for him. It was believed that he was also an accomplice in the conspiracy. At the time of his arrest, Danny Pavek was unemployed. While on the run, he got by with odd jobs. Despite plans to leave Lacey, his alleged complicity was never confirmed by the Supreme Court, which made the case quite confusing. Only a year and a half after Michelle's death, the trial of Lacey began on November 10, 2010. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict against Tansey Mathis. She is charged with aggravated first-degree murder of Michelle Kitterman and first-degree manslaughter for killing Michelle's unborn child. In December 2010, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The very next day after the verdict was passed, Lacey filed an appeal, insisting that the prosecution was biased, her privacy was violated during the collection of evidence, and she pointed out other inconsistencies and violations, none of which were confirmed or were insignificant in light of the crime committed. Her last appeal was rejected in June 2012. Lacey remains behind bars at the Washington Correctional Center for Women. Tansey, David, and Brent are also still in the correctional facility. They will be eligible for parole in 2041. Lacey's mother wrote a book detailing her misadventures connected with her daughter's life imprisonment. However, this book did not achieve much popularity. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Yu Young Chol. Yu Young-chul was born on April 18, 1970, into a poor family in Gochang County, South Korea. He had a challenging childhood, as he was bullied at school due to his family's low social status. This early experience of poverty is believed to have fueled his resentment toward wealthier individuals, as some of his future victims were affluent people. Yu and his siblings were abandoned by their mother at a young age. One day, their mother left them at their grandmother's house and never returned. The children were left to live in severe poverty with their elderly, ailing grandmother. Eventually, their father took them in and moved them to live with him and their new stepmother. However, the situation did not improve, as their stepmother treated them cruelly. Tragedy struck again in 1985 when Yu's father died in a traffic accident. Determined to change his life, Yu resolved to work hard and find success to escape poverty. He enrolled in an art school, but his time there was difficult. He was rejected and ostracized by his fellow students, who regarded him as mediocre. In 1988, he decided to attend a technical school to earn any available qualifications. However, instead of focusing on his studies, Yu turned to a life of crime in an attempt to make money quickly. Unfortunately for him, his criminal endeavors were largely unsuccessful. At the age of 18, Yu was arrested for stealing from a wealthy neighbor. He was sent to a juvenile detention center, but the consequences didn't end there. Since he could no longer attend his technical school classes, he was expelled, marking the beginning of a downward spiral. Yu didn't stop stealing. His thefts escalated to more valuable items, including cash and eventually cars. In 1991, he was arrested again for stealing from his landlord. This time, he was sentenced to 10 months in jail, giving him time to reflect on his actions. Despite his criminal record, his girlfriend, who worked as a masseuse, agreed to marry him, and they had a son together. However, instead of focusing on family life, Yu returned to stealing. He was caught stealing a car and sentenced to another 8 months in jail. Around the same time, Yu was diagnosed with epilepsy, leading to a brief stay in a medical facility before returning to his normal life. Interestingly, this epilepsy diagnosis would later become something he used to his advantage. Yu was no stranger to breaking the law for personal gain and had a history of similar crimes, which he regarded as only harming insurance companies. However, over time, he escalated from minor thefts to more serious offenses, becoming increasingly corrupt and unhinged. Yu served a 2-year prison sentence for illegally selling adult photos. Upon his release, he resumed stealing, eventually landing back in prison for another 3 years. Meanwhile, Yu's wife silently shouldered the responsibility of raising their son while he repeatedly committed theft and faced arrests. Her patience finally ran out in the year 2000 when he was accused of abusing a young girl and was subsequently sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. This prompted her to file for divorce. During the investigation and while Yu was in custody, she reported his cruel behavior towards her and his struggles with alcohol abuse. After his release in 2003, Yu embarked on a path of depravity and crime that would horrify the world and plunge the city into fear for years. During his time in prison, he became fascinated with Jong Do-yeon, a murderer who killed 9 people between 1999 and 2000, primarily targeting wealthy individuals to commit theft driven by greed for accumulating wealth. Yu seemed to identify with Jong, sharing a deep resentment toward the rich, whom he blamed for his own misfortunes. Simultaneously, Yu developed profound animosity towards women following his divorce. This resentment, combined with his admiration for Jong, fueled his hatred and destructive thoughts. He later expressed beliefs that women should not be escorts and that wealthy people should be held accountable for their privilege. After moving into his mother's house following his release, these twisted ideologies drove him further down the path toward the horrific crimes that would eventually earn him the title of the Cloaked Killer. Yu was granted permission to see his son, though these visits could have taken a much darker turn. Yu had devised a plan to exact revenge on his ex-wife in the most brutal way possible, intending to kill both her and their son. However, he ultimately admitted that he couldn't bring himself to follow through with it, leaving his wife and child unharmed. Instead, he shifted his focus to a new target: wealthy individuals. But before pursuing this goal, Yu decided he needed to practice killing, and he already had a plan for how to do so. You crafted his own weapon by modifying a large hammer, shortening its handle for convenience. Armed with this weapon, along with a knife and gloves, he prepared for what he called his revenge. To test his weapon, you began luring stray dogs into isolated areas of the woods and brutally attacking them. It's worth noting that many serial killers exhibit similar behaviors in their early years. By September 2003, Yu was just an ordinary man who had recently been released from prison and was savoring his newfound freedom. However, this freedom was short-lived. Within 2 weeks, he began executing his sinister plan, targeting a wealthy neighborhood. His first victim was identified quickly. Professor Lee Deok-soo, a wealthy man in his 70s, lived with his wife, Lee Eun-ok, in one of the elegant houses in the neighborhood. At 10 a.m., Yu forcefully entered their home, armed with his homemade hammer. He first struck Deok-soo in the neck before shifting his focus to Eun-ok, brutally striking her with the hammer until he was certain she was dead. Finally, he brought Deok-soo's life to an end. After committing the crime, Yu calmly cleaned the rooms, scrubbed away the blood, and walked out. However, he soon realized he had left his knife behind and returned to retrieve it. This time, when he broke into the house more aggressively and caused damage, he deliberately staged the scene to resemble a botched robbery in an attempt to mislead investigators. This plan ultimately backfired. When the police inspected the crime scene, they discovered footprints that later proved to be a significant clue. On October 9th, in another upscale neighborhood of Seoul, Yu, carrying the same weapons, broke into a wealthy family's home around noon. Inside, he encountered an 85-year-old woman named Kang Eun-sun and fatally stabbed her with a knife. Her screams caused her daughter-in-law, Lee Suk-jin, to rush into the room. Yu angrily demands that Suk-jin bow her head in defeat, but she firmly refuses and even threatens him in front of her husband and sons. Enraged, Yu reacted violently and killed her swiftly. Eun-sun's disabled nephew, Go Jin-soo, became Yu's next victim. Yu forced him to kneel and brutally beat him with a hammer, killing him mercilessly. This case revealed just how severely Yu's psychopathy had escalated. Evidence from this crime scene and previous ones caught the attention of the police, providing them with a crucial lead. Investigators launched a search through their database to identify the perpetrator. Meanwhile, Yu continued his violent spree, seemingly emboldened by his actions. His next target was a 60-year-old woman named Ju Jun-hee, who lived alone. Yu broke into her house and, upon encountering her, dragged her into the bathroom, where he savagely beat her nearly to death. Her son later discovered her barely alive, but she succumbed to her injuries despite paramedics' best efforts, dying half an hour after being found. Media outlets began reporting on strange deaths in the area, noting their geographic proximity and raising questions about whether the crimes were connected. Evidence from various crime scenes indicated similarities between the killings, making the connection increasingly apparent. Public fear grew, yet police initially denied any links between the murders. It would be several weeks before Yu's dark urges drove him to kill again. On November 4, 2003, he broke into a home in a wealthy neighborhood located in Gyeonggi Province. Inside, he confronted the housekeeper with a knife, threatening her to comply with his demands. Under duress, she led him to the owner's bedroom, where the 87-year-old homeowner, Kim Jong-suk, and a 1-year-old child, presumably her grandson, were present. But this time, Yu encountered a situation he had never faced before. As Yu rushed at Jong-suk with a hammer, the housekeeper grabbed the baby and attempted to escape through the door. Instead of attacking the child, Yu took him from her, carried him to another room, and left him there unharmed. Returning to the bedroom, Yu discovered the homeowner was dead and redirected his violence toward the housekeeper, who tragically lost her life in the attack. However, this time, Yu made a critical mistake. To cover his tracks, he resorted to his usual method of smashing property to make the scene appear like a failed robbery. However, he realized he had left blood traces on the safe door after cutting his finger while attempting to open it, a crucial lead for the police. If Yu's decision to spare the baby initially seemed to hint at a shred of humanity, his chilling actions afterward destroyed any such impression, leaving a trail of horror and disgust. You attempted to destroy evidence by setting the house on fire with the child still inside, then watched the flames consume parts of the home from a safe distance. Despite the intense fire that destroyed the bodies and the main bedroom, most of the house remained intact. Investigators were able to recover surviving CCTV footage, which offered them a glimpse of South Korea's new serial killer. The footage showed a man wearing a sweater he had taken from the house, likely to cover the bloodstains on his clothes. Although only visible from behind, the image provided a valuable lead for investigators. Police also discovered another set of shoe prints at the crime scene, further linking this murder to previous ones. Still, Yu continued his spree. While following his established pattern, he decided to deviate and seek change, which led him to his next victim. Yu, now posing as a police officer by obtaining a uniform, began extorting money from women working in escort services or the red light district. He excelled at this illegal activity, earning enough money to rent an apartment and maintain his reckless lifestyle. During this time, Yu started dating a woman from the escort services. His disdain for women deepened when she refused his proposal to live together after discovering his troubled past, including his previous marriage. This rejection marked a turning point for Yu, sparking his desire for revenge. On March 16, 2004, Yu returned to the streets with sinister intentions. Dressed as a police officer, he pretended to arrest a girl and took her to his apartment. This time, unlike his previous victims, he killed her by strangulation, fully revealing his deeply sadistic nature. Due to the inability to safely move the body out of the third floor, Yu decided to put it in a grocery bag and bury it near Sogang University. To ensure he wouldn't reuse the burial site, he marked the spot with a bottle cap. His next victim deviated from his usual pattern. After buying fake Viagra from a street vendor on Jae-sun but it doesn't work, Yu once again disguises himself as a police officer and arrests Jae-sun for selling illegal pharmaceuticals. Driving Jae-sun's personal van, he went to a secluded area and launched a brutal attack. He wounded Jae-sun in the head and neck, but Jae-sun fought back, injuring him in the process. Infuriated by the resistance, Yu struck back with a hammer, landing over 20 brutal blows to Jae-sun's head. Yu's blood was discovered in Jae-sun's van, forcing him to eliminate the evidence. He drove the van to a nearby parking lot under cover of night and set it on fire, destroying both the vehicle and the body inside. Following this event, Yu focused on targeting women working in escort services within the red light district. This marked the beginning of a brief but horrifying series of murders, resulting in the deaths of many people and leaving deep scars on the families affected by his violent actions. Yu changed his approach by luring women to his apartment, where he assaulted them individually before burying their bodies in various locations. To avoid burying in the same place, he marked each place with a bottle cap. He repeated this method with 9 victims, however, his lack of foresight ultimately led to his downfall. Suspicion arose when a massage parlor owner began noticing a pattern of unexplained disappearances. Several of the missing women worked for establishments owned by the same man. Strangely enough, family or friends are often unaware of these disappearances because many of these girls live independently, which makes them more likely to become targets of attacks. One day, the massage shop owner received a request from a man who wanted to use the services of a girl working at the shop. Further investigation revealed that the phone number belonged to one of the earlier missing victims. Alarmed, the owner contacted the police and worked with them to craft a plan aimed at capturing the perpetrator, suspecting that the women were being abducted and possibly trafficked. When the investigators sent an undercover employee to collaborate on the plan, the police prepared to apprehend the suspect, seemingly close to detaining Yu. However, Yu abruptly canceled the meeting and called the girl back. The reason? The girl's height played a key role. Many of Yu's victims had been forced into submissive positions, often kneeling, which indicated his preference for control. His targets were typically elderly individuals, vulnerable women, or escort service workers, chosen because they were easier to overpower. Encountering a taller girl made Yu feel less dominant, which prompted him to call off the meeting at the last minute. The police didn't give up. Shortly afterward, they identified the perfect undercover officer, and Yu took the bait. Before he could act, He was surrounded by police officers. During his arrest, Yu was seen desperately chewing something, later discovered to be business cards belonging to several women. During interrogation, he provided shocking information far beyond the expectations of the police. Yu was transferred to the Seoul Police Department, where investigators questioned him thoroughly about his activities. Although he denied any involvement in abducting or trafficking women, Yu ultimately confessed to multiple murders in affluent neighborhoods. He claimed to have killed more than 20 people, beginning with the Gangnam-gu murders and concluding with the murder of an escort worker just days before his arrest. Despite his confession, the police were skeptical and hesitant to believe his claims immediately, suspecting him of exaggerating to shock them. Whether Yu had fully planned his next move is unclear, but he exploited his epilepsy to stage a fake seizure. Remarkably, the officers believed him, removed his handcuffs, and left the door open, assuming he was too weak to pose any threat. This lapse in judgment allowed him to escape to his apartment, where he began destroying evidence. Within 12 hours, the police located Yu again and detained him, this time ensuring there was no opportunity for him to flee. During interrogations, Yu repeatedly changed his story. He eventually agreed to guide the police to the burial sites of his victims. During these crime scene investigations, he earned the nickname the Cloaked Killer because the police had to photograph the remains while Yu was draped in a yellow cloak, his face concealed behind a mask. The police department faced significant criticism for its handling of the case. Yu might never have been caught if not for the intervention of local massage parlor owners. He had openly stated that he intended to continue his acts of revenge until someone stopped him. During the trial, Yu attempted to attack the judge and then attempted to end his life while in custody, causing unnecessary delays in the trial process. Upon returning to court, he attempted to assault a spectator and showed no remorse toward the families of his victims. Eventually, Yu Young-chul was found guilty and received the maximum sentence. He is now on death row. Although South Korea has not carried out the death penalty since 1997, his appalling crimes and utter disregard for human life have sparked outrage across the nation. Even if the death penalty is not enforced, the public finds solace in knowing that Yu will spend the rest of his life behind bars.